Hi guys, thank you for joining the live stream. No intro music anymore, I guess. I've basically given up because of the copyright strikes on my own arrangement of a 1300-year-old composition by Adi Shankaracharya. So each and every of my live streams in the last few days have got copyright violation, not exactly strikes, but the revenue is getting shared with some random singers called Akhi Dash and Dipanita Goswami. Uh, Even they probably don't know it because it's not like you have to manually give strikes. It's just that they are copyright protected algorithmically. So YouTube just recognizes them, recognizes the melody, and gives it to them without the algorithm knowing that those melodies aren't even copyright protected. So anyway, we'll dive straight into today's discussion, and I'll have to make some other piece. Yeah, why don't you make your own BGM or intro? Yeah, these were my own BGM and intro music only. Dogecoin event is going on. Okay. So the arrangements were mine only, both the outro music and the intro music. So I've been planning a Kyle Bhairav Ashtakam version of mine for a long time. Now I can't do that as well because if the algorithm of YouTube is that idiotic, then they'll think I'm plagiarizing the melody of Kyle Bhairav Ashtakam by some other artist as well. तो मुझे melody भी change करना पड़ेगा. I mean everything from scratch. Yeah, I wanted to keep it associated with culture and roots a little. So अभी काल भैरव अष्टकम का शायद मेलोडी चेंज करके रिदम तो चेंज वैसे भी करने वाला था. द ओरिजिनल रिदम गोज लाइक दिस दैट देवराज सेव्यमान. I was planning to do it in 4/4 so that the groove becomes ding trak ding trak devraj sevyaman. I was planning to do it in this groove. So let's say I'll probably change the melody as well. Lyrics के लिए copyright तो नहीं देंगे भोसरी वाला अभी तक. So today we are going to discuss the living legend Michael Malice, an anarcho-capitalist, allegedly phenomenal speaker, phenomenal author, and he recently went on Triggernometry, the podcast we all love, to discuss the evils of the Soviet Union. So let's check that out.
People are getting put up against the wall in huge numbers. He did not hold back in terms of this is going to have to be, an abattoir. It was very much war, class warfare. And when they said war, they meant war. So Stalin introduced the idea of socialism in one country. He went through group after group, which were threats to his power, and just killed. The number of people he killed was just astronomical.
The example after example after example that you give, it felt like, would there be anybody left in Russia? Michael.
Francis.
Michael.
Francis.
Michael.
Michael Malice, welcome back.
Thanks.
He's laughing already.
Yes.
It's great. We're going to talk about the Soviet Union, but before that, how are you?
I'm doing wonderfully, thank you. By the time this airs, I'll be doing terribly.
Yeah. Well, we're recording this right around election time.
Yeah.
So we won't talk about that.
so we won't talk about
There's
that.
nothing we can say about it.
Yeah.
I'm just looking at you. You wanted lots of banter at the top of the show.
I did. I didn't. When did I indicate that?
You indicated it to both of us.
How?
Yeah.
You said, I want it to be fun.
I said banter. I didn't say fun.
You see, really, your soul is in England because that's what we do in England. We have banter, but there's no fun.
Yeah, that's kind of true. I see PMQs, and
Yeah.
it's banter. It's not really fun.
Yeah, exactly. So, but it's wonderful to have you on. You're doing very well. Are you looking forward to this bright new dawn that is awaiting us?
But by the time this goes out, the dawn has already happened.
This golden dawn.
Yeah.
America's over, depending on which side you support.
Yeah.
I Right. And I think we're at an interesting point where no matter what happens, there's going to be a huge loss of faith in the electoral system, which is really going to be interesting to see.
Why?
Well, because if Kamala gets in, it's like, come on, this is a joke. This woman didn't go through the primary. She got installed by the machine. And if Trump wins, well, obviously, insurrectionist, all that nonsense.
Yeah.
So it's just like, I think people are going to start giving up. I know my voice just broke there.
Your voice gave up on you as you were
My
saying
voice gave up.
Yeah.
You gave up.
You gave up. But that's a really dangerous moment, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah, Michael loves it though.
I don't
this
love
is
danger.
wishful thinking. This
I
is
don't
wishful
love
thinking. He
danger
wants
at
everyone
all.
to lose faith.
Yeah.
So this this podcast happened before the election results.
I want them to lose faith, but it's still dangerous. I mean, when people are desperate, bad things happen.
Yeah.
And good things possibly happen, but it's still scary.
I'm not Barack Obama. I missed the flag.
Yes, our very own in-house another newly turned libertarian has started a campaign to nationalize pan and gutka industries so that they are ably run by babus, just the way babus run everything else. So anyone who really likes the gutka and pan industry, stand behind him. He has even changed his Twitter handle to someone asking for gutka and pan to be nationalized.
See,
You mean in the men's room?
There we go.
There
There's
we go.
banter.
There's
the banter
the-
that we wanted.
there's the banter that
How
you want.
are we supposed to have a serious conversation with you, Michael? Is that possible?
I was on John Stossel, who is the greatest.
Yeah.
His producer many years ago was going to have me on and asked my other friend, Andrew. He goes, can he ever be serious? And Andrew goes, can the North Korea guy ever be serious? Yeah, he can.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's an interesting jump off point. The North Korean guy can ever be serious, because I read your book. It's brilliant.
Which one?
The White Pill.
Well, no, the Dear Readers about North Korea. That's what I'm asking.
Oh, right. Okay. I read The White Pill. And there are some, it's a beautiful book.
No,
but
thank you.
there are moments of real darkness within that. And as somebody who is not au fait with Soviet history, the characters, you really bring them to life. I mean, let's start off with Lenin, because
Character se yaad hai. Today our viewer Buddhadev Bhattacharya archives that handle. He was the one who gifted the book, R.C. Majumdar's book, Hindu Muslim Sanskriti. He has again sent me money today, and as a sort of a money to buy specifically a particular book, which is Ayn Rand's famous book. The name escapes me. What was the name of the book? A fiction story of just 80 pages. I already ordered it. It will arrive on Saturday, and I think we'll do a marathon live stream and finish it in one go. It's called I can't remember the name.
because how Lenin is presented on a surface level to the Lenin you describe in the book is completely different.
Well, how so?
So with Lenin, we kind of see that, he was a founder of communism. He was this visionary. He took communism and was the founding father of the Soviet Union.
Yeah.
But I didn't realize the psychopathy and the brutality of that man.
Yeah, the thing that's always fascinating when people there's 2 points I want to make here. There's this hypothesis in the university system, like good Lenin, bad Stalin. That Lenin came in and he was kind of good cop, and then Stalin. This is kind of the Trotskyite idea that Stalin came in and the revolution was betrayed by Stalin, and it's really completely historical. That all the roots that Stalin later developed and certainly cranked up the dial had its antecedents during the Leninist period. We see this directly when Emma Goldman and Alexander Berkman, who were 2 anarchists who had been deported from the States, talked to Lenin to his face and were like, look, you're arresting people for political views. You promised free speech. And he goes, look, that's a bourgeois concern. He had the camps, he had the secret police, all these things. And when people talk about like, oh, that wasn't real communism, or, it hasn't been tried, he was willing, explicitly goes, we're not holding back.
Yes, and free, so pan and gutka prices will decrease, And also, I think free pan and gutkha should be distributed, from taking money from the rich pan and gutkha eaters to eaters or chewers to the poorer gutkha pan and chewers. And also popular among women, yes, they also should get free gutkha and pan. Goddank is saying, some libertarians say communism is not that bad. Yes, they might be the ones like our libertarian bros who say that reservation should stay. Why do a lot of liberal and libertarians have such soft spot for communism despite knowing coming history? I don't know a single libertarian who has a soft spot for communism, but liberals have a soft spot for communism because of sentimentalism, Christian morality, egalitarian, that niceties, soft bigotry of low expectations.
This is our one shot to get it right. We're not going to be like hemming and hawing. We're not going to be, mincing words. People are getting put up against the wall in huge numbers. And one of the people in the secret police said, like, look, better 10 innocent people die than one spy gets away. When you're splitting wood, chips will fly, meaning you're going to have a lot of blood. And he explicitly and constantly talked about like blood flowing, the blood of our enemies and, liquidating these classes. And they did it, just huge numbers of people were killed or deported or so on and so forth. So you have to give him credit.
भाई सब nationalize कर रहे हो तो गांजा भी nationalize कर ही देते हैं.
In a very, very, very loose sense of the word, where he's like, all right, we're doing this for real. This isn't like, oh, I'm a conservative, we're going to have a free enterprise zone, or I'm going to just privatize the electric company. He's like, we're going balls to the wall as fast as we can. He pulled back when things weren't going as well as he wanted with the new economic policy, the net policy, but he did not hold back in terms of this is going to have to be, an abattoir.
Michael, you mentioned this idea of real communism, this meme, real communism hasn't been tried. Right. So according to Lenin, what was real communism? What was he trying to do?
Well, the communist model, it was funny. My friend Ben was giving a talk at Hereticon earlier this week, and he goes, what can I say that'll really piss him off? And he wanted to give a certain topic. But it was, and this is going to upset a lot of people, which is why it's fun to say it, but it was essentially a transhumanist movement. Their vision was, we're going to fundamentally, long-term, remake the nature of man and the nature of society. They thought that human beings are almost entirely plasticine, that people are born and they're subject, a function of their economic class. And if you just get the right knobs and levers, you can create, an ideal society at the end where the state will wither away. This was kind of this almost biblical sense that when communism is done, you're not going to need a government because everyone's going to know their role and do it naturally.
Which is why a lot of libertarians also used to get called socialist at one point. That socialism means societally we get together and do something nice.
But what people don't appreciate now, because when we look at the Soviet Union or Venezuela or Cuba, and there's that joke about what did the socialists use before they used candles, light bulbs, but the idea was, no, we're scientific.
Have you heard this joke? What did the socialists use before candles? They used light bulbs. The country became poorer.
This isn't this kind of shopkeep, bourgeois. Oh, you've got the little greengrocer in this corner and you've got a little library that's all very quaint. We're going to turn the entire country into a factory or a laboratory where everyone's working together. And there we're not going to waste money on profits for some billionaire while everyone's starving. And we're going to create this super efficient machine. I mean, if you...
Yeah. So, goddank, it's not Stockholm Syndrome if they haven't faced it. No, if you have faced it, face the brunt of it, you had to run away to a different country or a state for a job or your life, and even then you support it, then you have Stockholm Syndrome, like the Bengali commies in Bengaluru, Hyderabad, Pune, Mumbai, USA, Europe, etc. But most libertarians are non-Bengali, so they actually haven't faced communism. And then there's the Manuvadi communists who also haven't lived in Bengal, so they don't know what it does.
You look at the iconography, nowadays leftism is much more environmentalist, but it was all about smokestacks and, electrical wiring. Like, we're going to create this kind of very industrialized nation state. And
to what end?
To the point where because we're producing so much, because the Industrial Revolution came out and Marx was very much a function of the Industrial Revolution, now there's so much being produced, you're not going to need to work, right? Because we're going to be overflowing with cars and bread and everything you want, because everything.
We've been hearing that for a long time, haven't we? That now, अभी आएगा एक टाइम जहां से हमको UBI ही देना पड़ेगा क्योंकि सब काम वाम सब चला जाएगा और कोई काम नहीं रहेगा कुछ करने को. Now people are defending CBDC even.
Things being done efficiently and scientifically. Frederick Taylor was kind of a model for this.
वैसे, does anyone have any predictions regarding CBDC? Is there? I don't think there's any way at all, but hope against hope. Is there any way that we won't do a CBDC in India? And if so, can you all see any way that the worst outcomes don't happen in India with CBDC? Worst possible outcomes?
He was an American thinker who basically went to factories, was an efficiency expert, right? And they took that, like, what if we apply this to society at large? So when they talk about real communism, you know, it's really this kind of thing where it's kind of redundant. It's the sense of like, real communism means it works. This didn't work, therefore it's not real communism. It's like, sure, but real is what you put into practice, not what's in your head. And if he, who didn't hesitate in any sense to impose this vision on a country, if that wasn't real, I don't know what is.
And also, what you encapsulate brilliantly in the book is he was a brilliant man. Terrible man, awful man, evil you could even describe, but brilliant at the same time.
That was never a question. And the thing that I talk about in my other book, The New Right, is when you're in the middle and you look at the fringes.
This comment just reminded me of that famous line by Ollivander about Voldemort, that he did great things, terrible, but great.
Is madness and innovation are equidistant, right? When you hear some great visionary, you don't know, this guy's a complete lunatic, or holy crap, this is what's going to be in 20, 25 years. I'm going to use a very gauche example. I read Cyndi Lauper's autobiography, and, you know, she dressed in a very idiosyncratic way. Before she made it, you know, she was working at this store called Screaming Mimi's in Manhattan, dressing in this kind of thrift store, pre-hipster finery, like 90s hipster, and women would like make fun of her, and she thought to herself, your daughter's going to be dressing like this in 5 years. And she was correct, right? So a lot of times what seems crazy today will be reality, and not only the norm, but popularized soon after that. And the reason the Germans wanted to get Lenin back into Russia, obviously not the Soviet Union, during World War I, because the idea was, all right, this is completely bat crap. This can never happen in real life. He's a loon, but the guy's charismatic. He knows how to make trouble. Let's throw him in there and kind of, you know, put a monkey wrench into the gears. And when he sees power, everyone's like, well, hold on a minute. So people don't realize that before this, today, the word socialism is synonymous with having government control. That wasn't what socialism meant before in 1917. There were different strands of socialism, because it meant the idea of everyone working together for the betterment of society. So anarchists were considered socialists, and corporatists, and so on and so forth. Once that hit, and we have the first real self-identified socialist country, a lot of the left were like, all right, we got to see if this works. This is our one shot to make it happen. Yeah, there's some kind of broken eggs, wink, wink, which means murdered children and people. But this is still our one shot to put into practice.
Yeah, broken eggs se yaad aaya ke, so that was their justification, of course, that yeah, we had to break some eggs to get the omelette and all. So George Well once had a conversation with a Kazakhstani or Tajikistani communist while going somewhere on a truck. And that guy, after defending the Soviets, says that, and George Orwell goes on giving counter arguments and saying that how horrible Soviet Union is. He says, yeah, you have to break a few eggs to make an omelette. And George Orwell asks, where is the omelette? Sirf to danda toota. Omelette kahan bana?
Yes. So we got to give them every opportunity they have. It was what I think was Eugene Lyons called the guinea pig theory of revolution. Like, sure, you know, I have the quote in the book, sure, these Russians squeal and make noise, but what are we up here? We can't worry about the animals. This is our chance to, kind of experiment on them and find out, what makes the entire world tick.
And you've saying experiment, and we've touched on Lenin's brutality, but I think
let's reply to some of the questions here. Hot TV, yes, bulber pod candle neology sheitaro taka poisha nei. And Rishi, the point of a high protein diet and veganism, not veganism anymore really, but no dairy definitely, and no meat but eggs sometimes, most days, because then I can be vaping and still be reasonably healthy enough. Perfection, I'm not disciplined enough for perfection, obviously. This is my vice. And anyway,
it's really important for people who may not be au fait with this historical character. Let's really delve into the brutality aspect of it, because it's really important.
Brutality se yaad aaya. So Nietzsche had said that absolutism is a pathology, and the love of irony, imperfection, is a sign of a sound, healthy mind. So yes, it shouldn't be that either 100% full, perfect, healthy life with 100% complete discipline, or you become a fat fuck who's on SSRI and is transgender. No, I'm with vape and working out.
What did he do to his own people that meant, to my eyes, that he's a monster?
Well, I think so what's interesting is all the things that, or most of the things that the Bolsheviks and their allies hated about the Tsar, they took and implemented later and again escalated to an extreme degree. It kind of...
Yeah. By the way, M. Shastri, what happens when someday Congress, the likes of Rahul Gandhi, come to power and there's CBDC? What a nice time they'll have. One snap and Sanjeev Sanyal goes broke. His net worth is 0 rupees.
So he had, under the Tsar, you had internal passports, right? So you couldn't travel from, one place to another without the permission of the state. This, the Bolsheviks later implemented. They had the concentration camps, but the amount of people in the camps that the Tsar had were quite small relatively. These were for political radicals. And also, like, they had books, they could write letters. It's jail, but it's not what we think of as this kind of intense prison system. He, basically they would take entire populations. And one of the big things about Marxism, and this is what conservatives, kind of harp on, and quite understandably, is their absolute hatred of faith and religion. So they really wanted to make sure anyone who had any kind of religious background bent the knee and repudiated.
Now, this part sounds a lot like many libertarians, most libertarians, I think, in India so far. Although a lot of Hindutwadis have recently started cozying up to the idea of libertarianism. I would, of course, like to take some credit for that. But most libertarians have not been able to make libertarianism at all palatable, at all even relevant up until 2024 to 2025, because all of them have been rabid, insane, blind Hindutva and pretty much Hinduism, pretty much anything Indian, anti of all those things. Haters of Hindutva, Hinduism, India, everything. They've all been Jayant Bhandari's bastard children.
Their faith. And you can imagine how difficult it is to maintain this sense of faith when your entire country is against you, when the costs are extremely high and you don't see any glimmers of hope. And they were right. So there was a group of religious people. They basically put them on an island and they wouldn't take like Bolshevik money. And they said, all right, well, if you don't take this money, you're not going to eat. And they all starved to death. They would put people, the Soviet Union or what became the Soviet Union wasn't exactly Tahiti in terms of climate. So they had no problem putting people above the Arctic Circle with no clothes and being like, all right, you're going to stay here and you're going to work for us. And if this doesn't break you, that's perfectly fine. So the German Auschwitz model, Arbach model.
Yeah, because in order to prevent the evils of capitalism, people have to roam around naked in the Arctic Circle.
Cry was apparently a sarcastic reference to the Soviet vision of, if you work hard enough, you're going to kind of divest your evil history and become a productive member of society. You could pay off your debt that you've made for your parents, were wealthy landowners or bourgeois or something. Like you are punished for the sins of your ancestors.
Most people would associate those camps with Stalin, though, but what you're saying is they were implemented under the Tsar and then really expanded under Lenin.
Yeah, under the Tsar was the Katorga system, but it was Lenin just really made it much more. And Stalin.
M. Shastri's argument here seems to be a nice one. Then are the libertarian concerns about CBDC unfounded? And is there any way that Rahul Gandhi might still do it just because it's going to be technically easier? Debanking might be just as easy, one phone call. What do you all think, guys? Vote on M. Shastri's comment.
Stalin, took it to the nth degree.
Mm-hmm.
And because what was really interesting in the book is you're hearing about the way he's treating political dissidents. You're hearing about the way he's treating people he perceives as his enemies. And then in the left, the journalists, some of the intellectuals in America and in my country, like the UK, heroes of the left, like Malcolm Muggeridge, extolling the virtues of the Soviet Union and Lenin in particular. It's really fascinating.
Yeah, before Lenin, you had something called the Fabian Society.
Mm-hmm. Do you all know, I forgot to tell you in the beginning that this is the reason I actually decided to do this reaction video on this video, because of the discussion on Fabian Society. Hamare Congress, hamare chacha, hamare London School of Economics bros and homies. Fabian socialist. Some guy once gave a laugh react because I called Congress and Nehru Fabian socialists. They did that thing that one capital letter, one small letter, as if I said a big joke that Nehru was a Fabian socialist. The fuck are you saying? So, Harsh, start with economic facts and fallacies. If you just want to give it a shot and get a whiff of Thomas Sowell's writing. If you are open to reading a big book in the very beginning, then start with basic economics because it's a more complete way to understand Thomas Sowell's views, and then move on to applied economics by Thomas Sowell. Bipra, I'm very curious about what you did. Tell us the story. What arguments and what was the topic and what arguments did you give? Another point I wanted to respond to was, is Jayant Bhandari a libertarian? No, he's a Libertarian.
Which was the precursor to the Labour Party, and they were heavily involved with the London School of Economics. That was a whole little scene. And this sounds like a joke, but the Fabians' original logo was a wolf in sheep's clothing. And when they thought that was too on the nose, they changed it to a tortoise, meaning slow and steady wins the race, because they wanted socialist control. But their vision is, all right, we're going to do it in a democratic way, gradually, piece by piece. We're going to take over the entire country and have everything run by the state. So they were, and the Webbs, Sidney and Beatrice Webb, were two Fabians who really had a complete love affair with the Soviet Union.
And Nehru.
But the thing that's really kind of fascinating that people, I think, don't appreciate is they thought these Westerners who were extolling the virtues of the Soviet Union, there were two types. There were those who knew the truth, and they're like, all right, we need to kind of downplay this because we got to give these people every chance to make it work.
Yes, otherwise we'll just say it real Fabian socialism hasn't been tried yet. Kushagra, this interview is 7 days old. You must have seen some other interview with Michael Malice.
So we don't want to be criticizing them too much and undermining this very fragile thing that they're building. But even worse were the ones who had never stepped foot east of Paris, who knew perfectly well what's going on there because they read the right books and newspapers. And maybe if you read a book, you'd understand this glorious experiment that's happening in Moscow. And St. Petersburg, Leningrad. So it's this arrogance of the intelligentsia, and Lenin very much played into it. I mean, the term "useful idiots" applies to these people. That was a Soviet concept because the idea was in the West, the Soviets were like, "Oh, you guys are great. You're basically our ambassadors. You're important," and they were the ones.
No wonder we became a Soviet colony up until 1991.
You would go to for that pull quote that journalists needed then as they do now.
Right. There's a lot of that going on, and there was.
We live in an age where everything about...
Yeah, so Fabian socialists weren't relevant. Soviet Union propped them up to make them relevant.
And your family today. Try Aura free for 14 days.
By the way, Anit Dash, He's saying Raga will never become PM. That's what they said about Narendra Modi. That's what they said about Mamata Banerjee. That's what they said about Donald Trump. So,
and see if any of your personal information has been exposed. Head to aura.com/triggerpod to start your free trial. That's aura.com/triggerpod. Don't leave yourself vulnerable. Click the link in the description or scan the QR code to take control of your digital safety today. How honest was Lenin about the stuff that he intended to do? Like before he actually came to power, did he say, we're going to kill all our class enemies? Did he say, we're going to have this, all of the things that they went on to do? Did they talk about, taking the farms away from the kulaks, the wealthy peasants? Did they promise to do all the stuff they ended up doing? Or did they have just very kind of flowery slogans that sounded really appealing to people?
Oh, it wasn't flowery. It was swordy. The slogans were very much, because this is the workers' revolution, right? So It was for the workers. So it was very much a philosophy of strength and muscle. It wasn't flowers at all. It's not this kind of hippie thing from the 60s. It's this idea that we're the strong ones. We're the ones who are literally building these buildings, building these factories off the sweat of our brow. And this fat, lazy capitalist is sitting in his house, smoking cigars, lighting them with currency, while we're starving and hungry. And it's a revolution. You don't have a revolution with flowers. And it was very much war, class warfare. And when they said
and they weren't feminists back then. No, they were fully into masculinity and stuff. That this is what real men do. They stand up against evil capitalists.
War, they meant war. They didn't mean we're going to play Monopoly and I win and whatever. It's like these people have to be liquidated. They have to be driven out of society. And in terms of the farms, it wasn't like, oh, we're going to get the farms from the kulaks. We're getting the farms from everybody. Everything is taken from everybody for the sake of the greater good. When they were first starting out, we're basically rebuilding society from the ground up. And the idea was if something was old, it was probably bad, right? And unscientific. So let's have communal lunchrooms so everyone eats together. Let's have
old and therefore bad. That famous story of a conservative and a progressive walking through a forest, and they come across a fence, and the conservative says, why is this the progressive says, why is this fence here? It's blocking our path. Let's pull it out and throw it away. And the conservative says, no, wait, let's have a discussion. Why is this fence here? Let's have a discussion about it at least. Someone must have put that fence here for some fucking reason. After a discussion, if we do come to the conclusion that yes, that fence is in fact useless, then we can throw it away. There would be, of course, some conservatives who would say, from a section of the world, a particular part of the world, who would say, no, that fence stays here no matter what. But a lot of conservatives wouldn't say that. And every progressive would say that fence goes away no matter what.
Have communal bathrooms so that people don't. This whole concept of privacy is something that they fought against, because whatever's bourgeois was bad. If grandma liked it, we're against it, right? So and even the concept of a family, it's like, wait a minute, if we're about fairness and equality, maybe you're a great dad, Francis, you're a terrible dad. It's not fair to his kid that your son has a good upbringing and his daughter doesn't. So these
are the pitfalls and the slippery slopes of egalitarianism and equality. इक्वालिटी नहीं है और होना चाहिए नहीं, यहाँ पे इक्वालिटी हुआ लॉ में, फिर यहाँ पे नहीं हुआ, अच्छा यहाँ पे हुआ तो मतलब अपब्रिंगिंग में इक्वालिटी नहीं हुआ, अपब्रिंगिंग में इक्वालिटी नहीं हुआ तो अब अगर हो भी गया फिर चाइल्ड न्यूट्रिशन में इक्वालिटी नहीं हुआ. ये करते करते सिर्फ सोवियत यूनियन तक ही जाना है.
Raise all the kids together in these big kindergartens, and the line even was like, listen, if you want to visit your kid, you'll have every chance if you want to. Now, they didn't go as far as that in the beginning, but that certainly was the vision. And in East Germany later on, up into even the 80s, if someone was, it's difficult to even discuss, if someone was regarded as politically incorrect or politically undesirable, and the line for that is very, very low. This isn't someone who's like secretly a spy. It's just someone who someone a bureaucrat regards a problem. They took the kids and gave them to be raised by good communists, and many of these kids and parents never saw each other again, or even more not more disturbingly, but disturbingly, after the German reunification, some of them did get reunited, but that kid you got taken away from when they were 4, and now they're 20, you're looking at a stranger.
Yeah.
You're never going to have that relationship if you raise them. So when you talk about putting the common good before the private good, every family is a conspiracy because you're always going to choose your family over society at large. It's a very human basic thing, but this is a problem for them because that's unequal. So you really have to break up this kind of family and these family ties. The very famous example, and you mentioned it in your book, Constant, as well, is Pavlik Morozov. Like, Americans can't even wrap their heads that this was real. But it was this kid who turned in his dad to the cops because was he hoarding grain or selling sweaters?
This is what I think of Manuvadi communists as well. And that's actually my answer to Retrowave Universe here, that whenever Marxists fail and they lose their mandate, they rebrand themselves because they are good at art and comprehension skills and stuff and narrative. First it was communist, leftist, progressive, then woke. Next will be, I think, Hindutvadi socialists and Hindutvadi communists, and they will go through all Hindu texts with a fine-tooth comb and say that evil capitalism is here, we must fight it, because that's what our ancients would have liked. Ancient India was communist, ancient India was socialist. See, the temples gave so much free stuff, the government funded the temples, therefore the government funded free stuff, and that's what we want. And a lot of people will fall for it. That Manuvadi communist guy is already gaining popularity. That's going to be the next coalition. And because right now you can announce freebies and stuff, freebies and reservation, but you're not going to beat BJP at giving freebies and reservation anyway, because they are pretty leftist at this as well. So the only thing the opposition is losing out on is the Hindu-ness, Hinduish vibes. So the moment you fuse the two, there you have a winning formula. Rahul Gandhi se nahi hoga. He is too far gone to now pretend to be a good Hindu. There will be other people to play that game.
I remember was the kid got killed by his family. There's statues of him, and you know, he's this basically kind of Paul Bunyan mythical figure. And the message to children taught in schools is, if you see your parents doing something wrong, turn them in. Even if
guys, remember this story we had discussed with when we brought Madam Political Scientist in our live stream?
Cost your life, that's the right thing to do. Now, you know, some of these kids came home, and if their parents are like, you probably shouldn't do that, that parent has to wonder, wait a minute, if I tell my son you shouldn't do that, is he going to tell his teacher that I told him that? Now I'm in trouble. So this kind of separation between kids and parents is, I think Americans are very, very naive, and Westerners as a whole, about the nature of evil, right? I talk about this all the time. They think someone with a crazy mustache banging desk. No, it's that teacher, school teacher, who's very sweet and very nice, and she pats your kid on the head and pats him on the back and says, good job, who also tells him, if you see your mom or dad doing anything, let me know. And she will trip over her sensible shoes to call the cops to turn them in. That is, to me, is the nature of evil. And it's so much more pervasive and insidious than some crazy man with epaulets and all these medals banging a desk.
Rishi's asking, does it decreasing corporate tax count as leftist? Decreasing doesn't count as leftist, probably, but having any corporate tax at all definitely counts as leftist.
Michael, just coming back to the agenda of the communists and how transparent they were about it, was that a popular offering? Did the people of Russia want that? Would they have voted for it in an election? So
when the Bolsheviks came in, they weren't there by themselves, right? They didn't have the numbers. So there were a few other groups that they partnered with. Bolshe, as you know, in Russian means more. You had the Mensheviks, who wanted things to go a little bit slower, who partnered with them. You had the left SRs. You had the anarchists, who wanted very localized control. The Soviet is a workers' council. This is an anarchist idea. So they kind of teamed up like, all right, we're going to put our differences aside. We're all completely against capitalism. We're all completely against aristocracy and the czar. And you can understand why for each of those things. Let's get together, make it. The whole point of socialism, the vision, is we're all in it together. We're all, from each according to his ability, each according to his need. Everyone is going to do what they can to make the society work, and then everyone's going to have what they need, and no one's ever going to have to go hungry again, right?
Yeah, I can definitely see a lot of Hindutvadi socialists getting a hard on listening to this sentence. Is zero taxation of business corporates really possible? Do you mean, should it be done, or is it feasible or not? I'm not interested in feasible versus non-feasible arguments anymore.
So that was the model. And everyone's like, all right, this is our shot. This is our chance. Let's make it happen. And as soon as Lenin had enough power, he's like, I forget the exact quote. It's in the book. Like, we've had enough talk of political discussion. It's time for action. And by the end of the year, I think it was 1922, anyone from any other political movement was in and of itself grounds for arrest, and if not execution. So explicitly so. So it's like, all right, we've won the Russian Civil War. The forces of the Tsar were defeated. The Reds beat the Whites. It's going to be red from here on out. Enough time for talk. The party is going to be running this country. Anyway, but just to specifically to your question about the popularity, I think people often forget context, right? It's not like this was like 1910s America and Lenin comes in. This was Tsarist Russia, where people were serfs, where they didn't have a pot to piss in. Everyone's hungry. You had his troops, basically having no compunction about inflicting violence on the people. They see the West, where the Industrial Revolution is happening. People are getting more and more food, or things are getting a little bit better in many regards, and they have nothing. And Lenin says, you have nothing because those people have everything. So join with me, and we're going to remake the society of the future. And you
Yes, at this opportune moment, asks this question. So yes, we were also told these things, weren't we? That West Bengal doesn't have anything because Delhi has everything. Kendrer Banchana. The Congress is not giving any money. The center is not giving us any money to run our state ably. Do you consider Chandrababu Naidu relatively more capitalist? Would he be better for India? See, even Modi was relatively more capitalist when he was running Gujarat. No, so the game might be different, obviously. Since I've never been a prime minister, really, I wouldn't know exactly. But it would be believable if someone claimed that to be the case. So yes, it's easy to be a capitalist in a state than it's to be in a prime minister's seat, I guess. So to conclude, I don't think he would be objectively that better than Narendra Modi.
You could very easily understand the appeal.
Mm.
And the thing that I found interesting with Lenin is the complete lack of loyalty he had to men who served him very well.
Should it be? Yes. BJP did decrease. So they became capitalist. They decreased corporate tax in 2019, isliye.
He had absolutely no compunction at all once he decided that somebody was done of killing people, and that was it. And
Because that's a private bond, and his only vision was the public bond. So again, it's the correct thing to turn in your friends. It's the correct thing to execute your former allies, because the only thing that matters is making society a better place.
And then you look at the kind of the relationship with Trotsky, which
Yeah.
I found particularly fascinating. So let's talk about that now. What was the relationship between them, and why did it end up
Well,
going?
who was Trotsky?
And
Let's start with that.
Let's start with
So
Trotsky.
Trotsky came late to the Bolshevik cause because he thought, okay, it was a little bit loopy. He actually lived in New York for quite some time, not that long, maybe a couple of years. His old newspaper was on St. Mark's Place, and the stairs that go to that newspaper are still there. You can see them if you ever visit, which I thought was very cool. And he was one of those people that, when things were happening in what became the Soviet Union, he's like, holy crap, this is our big shot. He was in many ways, even more than Lenin, the visionary, the ideologue. I mean, a lot of these college Marxists, academics, they would describe themselves as Trotskyists, because the idea was, all right, like he would have done it correctly. He wouldn't have Stalin's brutality. It's like, we know that's not true, by the way, because there's something called the Kronstadt Rebellion. So Kronstadt was this island near St. Petersburg. There were a bunch of sailors there and military people. They were essential to winning the Russian Civil War. As soon as the Civil War was won, they're like, all right, we got a list of demands. Free speech for leftists. That was the thing. The demands weren't even like, well, free speech for everyone. It goes, free speech only for like socialists, anarchists, and Bolsheviks. We want elections between these three. Free the political prisoners of the left. They didn't care about the capitalists. They didn't care about the bourgeois. Leftist political, all these things that Lenin promised. And they put up a rebellion. And Trotsky took charge of it, and they were all slaughtered. A few of them escaped to Finland. They said, come back. You'll have, we won't do anything to you. The naive ones came back, were sent to camps immediately. But this was the last rebellion of any size in what became the Soviet Union, until the late 80s, early 90s. So,
M. Shastri, there's no resolving poverty there's no making opportunities accessible. Uska to koshish chal raha hai. There's no end to these things. These are infinite bottomless pits. No matter how much you do it, there can be still made an argument that poverty has not been resolved as of yet, and there can be more opportunities made accessible, because these are those slippery slope communist situations, because these get to subjective definitions. Because let's say, no matter in any ideal situation, not everyone is going to have the opportunity. Therefore, someone or the other will always get to argue that opportunities are not fully accessible now. There will always be poverty, and there will be therefore someone always saying that poverty has not been resolved as of yet. So that can't be an excuse for not going full capitalist.
When Trotsky had his chance to show his true colors, he had no hesitation about shedding the blood. And he was right there with Lenin, from the beginning. What was fascinating, of course, and this is very much parodied by Orwell in 1984, is when Stalin came in, Trotsky was brilliant and he knew it. And that's a very bad thing for a politician to be, because many of the people around you are not going to be brilliant, and they know it, and you're going to be rubbing them the wrong way, because these people have very, very important politicians in every country and have very little reason to feel important, because they're not impressive personalities as a whole. And he made them realize that they're not impressive personalities. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, Stalin was working the party. He wasn't a big name at all, but he was laying the groundwork. So as he consolidated power, he got Trotsky kicked out of the party. Then Trotsky kicked out of the Soviet Union entirely. And basically Trotskyism, a term which was largely undefined, became synonymous with everything that's going wrong in the Soviet Union.
So he got...
Yes, but M. Shastri, the time and the people are not going to be there when this hypothetical resolving of poverty and the providing access to opportunities comes about, because it's a very hypothetical situation anyway. And so what I'm predicting is that, let's say 10 years or 20 years from now, when you consider that poverty has been resolved and when opportunities in fact have been provided to people, you are going to be in your 60s, or maybe when you are in your 80s or 90s, you are going to be the irrelevant old uncle or grandfather who still pines for the Modi days and thinks the best days were in the Modi days, and therefore doesn't see or doesn't want to see progress anymore in the country. And the socialists of those years, when you are 90, are going to tell you that, no, you see, poverty has not been resolved as of yet, because there is still some poverty, and opportunities are not available to everyone, because not everyone goes to the best school in the city or the country. Therefore, there's still more opportunity to be had, because it could be argued, looking at today's scenario, if Congress also tried to reduce poverty, right? And poverty did reduce to a certain degree up until 2014, up until 2024. The people who are 90 now, or who would have been 100, 110, they would have thought that yes, poverty has been solved if they looked at today's data. So it's a never-ending scale.
Got Trotsky kicked out of the party. What were the accusations? What was Trotsky's crime?
But hold on, before you go into that, because the accusations would all have been fabricated anyway. The interesting thing is, wasn't there also an ideological split? Because there were those communists who believed in communism within one state, and then that would spread elsewhere. And there were the others who believed in a world revolution that would sweep the world immediately. Well, wasn't that part of the split?
Yes, there were two big kind of ideological splits. So at a...
And that definition will change again when you are 90. And all the things we hope for today are actually had. I don't think it can be had even, unless you stop freebies and welfare. But maybe if at all we can get to that, it's going to be very slow because of not doing capitalism. And Maslow's hierarchy of needs have been met in USA, haven't they? But for some people, it has not been met. As long as there are those some people, for some reason or the other, who don't, whose lives are not that great, someone or the other will always get an excuse to say, let's resolve poverty first, and then we'll give tax breaks to these evil capitalists.
certain point, so Lenin was an ideologue and a visionary, but he wasn't completely detached from reality, right? So he understood, all right, this isn't going to happen overnight. This is a process, and it's going to be a long process. And since it's the first time we're running this experiment, excuse me, since the first time we're running this experiment, we don't know how long this is going to take. We're the alpha beta testing. So at a certain point, things were going poorly for even Lenin's taste. He goes, all right, this crap isn't working. They pulled back. They had something called the new economic policy, and they reintroduced an element of market capitalism into the Soviet Union. And as a result of this huge middle class almost overnight sprung up, and these people called net men, any new economic policy net men.
Mm-hmm.
And a little bit of liberty, and all of a sudden entrepreneurship takes hold, and so on and so forth. For a lot of Bolsheviks, this was like, oh, what? Hold the phone! Like, this is exactly what we're fighting against, and you, Lenin, our guy, you're putting this back after we defeated. This is completely unconscionable. And Trotsky is one of those who was just like, this is really not what we should be doing. We should be going harder on the gas and not putting on the brake. His other model, this is Trotsky versus Stalin, is this idea that, all right, workers of the world unite. You have nothing to lose but your chains. Meaning, a working class person in Russia has more in common with a working class person in Peru or the US or Australia than he does with like a capitalist in Russia, right?
Yeah, this is what they always think, and then they forget that the lower classes care more about culture than anyone else, and then they lose. But anyway, Observer is asking, have you seen Kanha song by Shreya Ghoshal for Bengali film Binodini? No, I haven't as of yet. It's for some reason that film's trailer, songs, none of it has appeared on my newsfeed, so I didn't know even it has released. But the fun part is that the director or the producer of Binodini, Ram Kamal Mukherjee, I did his first Bengali film, the background score for it, and the songs as well. Oh, there was one song in it. Me and my friend Krishano did it. So it was a 45-minute film called Rikshawala. It was my first background score work, so I wasn't very good at it. And Ram Kamal Mukherjee is also doing the film on 1770 Sannyasi Rebellion. It's going to be directed by the guy who was the assistant director of Bahubali 1 and 2. So I have big expectations from that. Let's see who he has for the background score for that film. I'm not interested in the Binodini film anyway, but I'm looking forward to the 1770 film. And there should be insane background scores. Otherwise, that film won't stand.
There's inherent class antagonism. So it is a worldwide movement for the working classes for their own liberation. Stalin, when he kind of came in, this is like the mid-20s, and so later, he understood. He's like, all right, because the model was, once we have our revolution, and this was very scary for Western governments.
Mm-hmm.
Once Lenin took power in the Soviet Union, that's the cue. So in Germany, in Britain, in the US, there was a huge amount of fear, like, holy crap, this is going to happen here next. Because the more time that went on, and the more that the Russian government under Lenin didn't collapse, the more other people like, hold on a minute, now it's our turn. This is a very kind of like what's happening here moment for Western politicians and intellectuals.
Well, and that was the idea of the Russian Revolution. That was the point. It was supposed to be the spark that started a world revolution. That's how communists saw them. The agenda was always to spread this ideology to the whole world. It's why the symbolism of the Soviet Union, even the flag, the flag didn't have borders on it. It was the globe and the hammer and sickle.
And Lenin's newspaper is called Iskra, the Spark.
The Spark, exactly.
That was literally his newspaper before he took power.
But Stalin didn't see it that way, right?
Stalin was like, all right, it's not that Stalin didn't see it that way. It's that by the time Stalin comes around, he's like, okay, this didn't happen.
Yeah.
So what do we do? So do we pretend like it did happen, or it's about to happen, or do we kind of double down on what we have? So Stalin introduced the idea of socialism in one country. Now, he very much still had his tentacles, all over the world. Spain is an extremely important example. Germany is another major example, and to some extent Britain, but nowhere near the extent of those other two that I mentioned.
And France. There's a huge communist movement in France. One of the reasons France did so poorly in the war.
Sure. But not to the extent that
Yeah, France is one of those dream countries of all Bengali communists. Oh, because a lot of great comments here. M. Shastri. Yeah, but you see, it's not about actual facts, M. Shastri. It's about interpretations and Isha and Messiah complex. There will be a group of people with Irsha who decide that no, abundance of opportunity hasn't actually arrived. And there will be someone always to come up with the Messiah complex and say that, yes, I am now the guy who is going to give you the abundance of opportunity. It hasn't really arrived as of yet, And even if that guy that guy doesn't have Messiah complex, what if he just lies and does it just for power, just to become the prime minister or chief minister? I into dubstep. I really like dubstep. I like agrotech even more, but I don't listen to it that intently, so I don't remember the names of any artists. I was liking those death step genres as well. When the vocalist of Suicide Silence was alive, he did one death step album. He was doing the vocals, and there was a guy, a DJ, working with him. Okay, Showman Balti is saying, I want to see with Shibuda. Shibuda is not going to work with anyone else for any time soon because now his team is set. No, he's given the biggest hit in Bengali cinema in the last 30-40 years. He's not going to change that music team ever, probably. American Vassal, to the extent that we all have to listen to the whims of the most powerful country, to a large extent, yes, but not exactly what a vassal does. Favorite DHH artist, the guy who did the rap for the Savarkar movie, Sambat or Sambata, something like that. Only for that, just one track. That's the best Indian hip-hop track I've ever heard. দাদা তুমি উইন্ডোজে গিয়ে তোমার পোর্টফোলিওটা দাও ওদের অফিস তো yeah portfolio, they won't care. This industry doesn't work on portfolios and resumes. It only works on contacts or the vibe and the signal theory that you bring with yourself, that what does it say about them if they hire me. For those reasons it could work, but for the most successful movie in 40 years, they are not changing their team.
The Germans and the Spanish, certainly, and much more than Britain. But that was kind of his, and this was one of his big butting heads moments with Trotsky. But as I talk about in the book, what these political differences are almost always a front for power plays. And if Stalin really wanted to work with Trotsky and have this kind of intellectual discussion, which supposedly Marxism allows, it's like, all right, now that we have the capitalists control the newspapers and publishing, everyone, the lowest of the low, can come up with their ideas, and we could take what brilliant ideas anyone has and create something that's amazing. Under that model, you would have them just hashing it out. All right, now we can come to this kind of consensus and move our way forward. But of course, that's not what ended up happening in reality.
So one of the really interesting moments in the book is when you talk about the end of Lenin's life, when he had the stroke. I mean, let's discuss that, because that's not something I don't think many people have heard of, and also Stalin's involvement in it.
There's this amazing kind of kitschy movie here that you might know about, called Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. Are you familiar with this movie?
Yes.
I'm not.
Okay, so for those who don't know, it was really this kind of big innovative movie because you had Betty Davis playing Baby Jane, and Baby Jane was a woman who had been a child actress, like a Shirley Temple figure. And now she's like in her 60s, whatever, she's old, but she starts losing her mind and starts thinking she's going to relaunch her singing career. So you have Betty Davis with this like little curls like Shirley Temple and putting on this makeup and looking completely, absolutely deranged. Just brilliantly done. Her sister, Blanche, who was played by Joan Crawford, was in a wheelchair. And Baby Jane was taking care of her. And she was basically a prisoner in her own home, Blanche. And as Jane gets crazier and crazier, it gets more and more dangerous for Blanche, because how's she going to escape? How's she going to get the word out? And Jane starts torturing her more and more and more. And there's this one very, very famous moment where Joan Crawford is sitting there and being like, Jane, you know you wouldn't be treating me like this. I wasn't in this wheelchair, trapped in this chair. And Baby Jane's at the window, and she looks out, she goes, but you are, Blanche. You are in that chair, and you ain't never getting out of it. And you never get out of this house either. And she locks her in the door. And it's this very chilling moment. Lenin had a series of strokes, and Stalin was his caretaker. And that meant Stalin kept track of all the communication in and out. He kept it kind of quiet, what state Lenin was in. And Lenin had a will, which basically said Stalin should not be taking over this party. He doesn't have the character. Stalin was very much a thug. he used to be a bank robber, just hoodlum kind of figure. Lenin was an intellectual, and Trotsky were intellectuals. So Lenin was like, this guy doesn't have the character, or there's many other problems with him. Well, that Stalin made sure to suppress it. And what Stalin introduced, he may have been the first, but he did it certainly to an extent other people didn't, was, again, this is very much parodied in 1984, was his idea of historical revisionism, in the sense of falsifying the past. So there's this great book called The Commissar Vanishes, where they have side-by-side photos that the Soviets basically falsified. So they had you'd have four pictures, be like Lenin, Stalin, and two other guys. Then the next picture, after one of the guys gets unpersoned, you have Stalin lighting one of the guy, and at the end it's just Lenin, Stalin. Now they're standing next to each other, and we laugh. But think about this: for the internet, if I'm looking at the newspapers and all the photos I see are Lenin and Stalin hand in hand, and I'm being told Stalin was Lenin's right-hand man from the beginning and Trotsky wasn't even there, what are you going to believe? Of course you're going to believe that. So I think Americans don't understand to what extent people in these totalitarian regimes, and not at all exclusive to the Soviet Union, are comfortably, blatantly lying about the history, to the point of just falsifying information that can, if anyone had access to free information, would clearly be disprovable.
And absolutely, because the moment you also...
Okay, some great questions here. Gravity, will Trump allow US aid to Bangladesh after reviewing it, or will he stop that tap completely? Depends on how much we cozy up to China. We have a bit of a seemingly better relation with China as of now. Maybe he'll expect us to go on a war footing further with China, or depends on whether China wants to annex Taiwan or not, whose side we take, all that depends. But I think a war between India and Bangladesh might be coming soon. This ISI guy going to Bangladesh, India might use this as an opportunity to thicken the chicken's neck right now. So in that, let's see which side Trump takes, or which side China takes. So many variables at the moment. There was something else I wanted to respond to. Yeah. As for Christianity in Northeast, the problem is that now, if someone is listening whom I know, I have many Anglo-Indian friends. I studied in a hill school, who started by a Scottish missionary who was being given funds from Scotland to do conversions. Meanwhile, that guy was friends with Rabindranath Tagore. And 2 years before he founded the school where I studied, he became inspired from Sri Ramakrishna, and came up with a paper called the feasibility, the thoughts on a idea of a universal religion and the feasibility of teaching it in our schools. He gave that as a it was his essay, and he presented it as a lecture to the then Bengal Teachers Conference. My school was founded in 1900, so that speech was sometime in the late 1800s, not exactly 2 years, 2 or 5 years before the school started. So anyway, he sees white kids wearing dhoti and topless, begging on the streets of Kolkata, because they were the byproducts of British bureaucrats, European bureaucrats, who were having sex with random people or their maids and stuff, and leaving the kids behind, byproducts of colonialism. They were called, there was a specific name for those kids. No, I can't remember the name. So they were the ancestors of today's Anglo-Indians. Not all, perhaps. So he thinks, let's start an orphanage for these kids, and then the people who are funding him keep on pestering him about conversions and ask for updates. Kitna hua? Kitne ko convert kiya? And he doesn't give a fuck, and tells those missionaries back home that I'll do conversions, you send me the money. Meanwhile, he's not doing any conversions here at all, and is going on building a coalition between Nepali Hindus, Lepchas, Gurkhas, Marwaris, who flocked North Bengal pretty much the entirety of its existence probably. Then some Christian trainee nurses and stuff, nuns also come here to serve in that school, because they thought there's a nice conversion racket going on here, and we are coming here to serve God. The first thing the founder of my school tells them is that, okay, you've come here to serve, right? Learn Bengali, Nepali as soon as possible. Otherwise, how the fuck are you going to serve these kids here? So, keeping all that in mind, my point is that the Christianity that goes on in the rest of the Northeast is not this Christianity. It's not benefit of mankind Christianity. It's not modern European or even the mainstream American Christianity where, everything nice is Christian. God wants you to be nice to everyone, etc. Good of mankind, or just some motivational speech every Sunday. This is the Northeastern Christianity is pre-Renaissance, pre-Enlightenment era Christianity. And there's always going to be some trouble with that.
So you want to go and disprove it? That's the end of you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, that's not even a question. Yeah. There's and the Russians, I'm sure this happened when you were still there, had something called anecdote, these little jokes. And there was one story about Kalinin, Mikhail Kalinin, who I think was high up in the Soviet Union, I forget the exact title, was talking about, oh, we're building all these great skyscrapers on Karl Marx Street. And one of the workers like, but comrade, I go on Karl Marx Street all the time. There's no skyscrapers. He goes, what are you going to believe? Your eyes are what's in the newspapers. You read a newspaper once in a while. But the joke is, you shouldn't trust your own senses. You should be obedient to what the experts are telling you.
Yeah, that seems so familiar today, right? Don't believe your eyes. Don't see what's happening in front of you in your Durga Pujas in your neighboring country. And the other joke was in Soviet Union. Remember that they pretend to pay us, we pretend to work.
Yeah.
Michael, and was Stalin, because there's a lot of debate about Stalin, whether he was a faithful communist who was just willing to enforce that ideology by whatever means necessary, or whether he was just a tyrant dictator who just did what was necessary for his own ends. Was he a dedicated communist?
It's very hard for me to kind of sift between those two. Or to figure out the utility of this distinction. I don't think that he was certainly dedicated.
He was committed.
Yeah.
He was passionate.
We're not going to quibble about that word. So that much we have down. The fact that one of the first, I talk about in this book, The Purges. So during the late 30s, he went through group after group, which were threats to his power, and just killed. The number of people he killed was just astronomical. And the first group he went after was the Society of Old Bolsheviks. These are the people even before Lenin, who did their time under the Tsar, who really were true believers where the idea of communism is like, okay, yeah, communism is going to happen. Okay, buddy, like cool story, bro. Like he went after them. He went after the military. The number of people, it was like 5 out of 6 generals, like 110 out of 112 lieutenants, just some crazy numbers. Slaughtered all them. Then he went after the secret police. Killed a ton of them. Then he went after the judges who put people in jail. So he went systemically every power center, and the amount of people, the amount of ministers that were killed, like 20s. The entire Belarusian Congress was arrested, like 100 out of 102 people. It's just crazy numbers where the only analogy would be like if John Adams got up and said everyone in the Continental Congress had actually been working for King George secretly, and you were expected to believe this. So I don't think that can be compatible with this idea of like, okay, this is communist ideology. That was clearly self-serving. And, the reason we kind of know this is Khrushchev in, I believe, 56, had his so-called secret speech. He gave this speech in the middle of the night. No one was allowed to attend other than the party loyal party members. And he just went through the numbers. He goes, this cult of personality that Stalin created is completely antithetical to the spirit of Marxism-Leninism. Lenin himself did have a lot of humility. He wasn't living in a palace. He very Spartan surroundings. He was the true believer. He's like, I'm going to practice what I preach. Stalin, had all these dachas and limousines and so on and so forth. So when Khrushchev came in, he goes, this is not what we're about. It's completely antithetical to the vision of an equal a society. So by the way, for those of us from Eastern Europe, and this applies to you certainly, there's this great YouTube channel where they take historical speeches and use AI, and you can hear them, and you could hear Khrushchev deliver the secret speech. And it brought a tear to my eye. because you just hear him in 1956, after 40 years almost of Soviet communism, being like, you were all right. The critics were right. It's all true. Because up until that moment, people like, oh, why would he do this? Why would he kill so many people? This is just Western propaganda. You undermine the Soviet Union, blah, blah, blah. And Khrushchev's like, it's all true. This is a complete, he was explicit. He goes, these people were tortured to give confessions. Like, are we to believe that all these people were, the only things people were guilty was crossing Stalin? And you hear him go on and on and on. And it's extremely moving.
Because one thing the book brings to life so brilliantly is, I understand Stalin was ruthless. I understand he, wiped however many people he wiped off the face of the earth. But the example after example after example that you give, it felt like, would there be anybody left in Russia?
Yeah. And this is the relentlessness.
No, there would be someone left in Russia. That's when the Buddhadev Bhattacharyas and the Nikita Khrushchevs would be the inevitability. That would have happened no matter what. At one point, you run out of people to kill. What about drum and bass? No, I've never listened to that genre properly.
Ayn Rand, who left the Soviet Union in 1926, she wrote a semi-autobiographical novel about her time there. It was called We the Living, but her working title was Airtight, because the idea was, and Kim Il-sung, the great leader, the founder of North Korea, did this kind of more successfully than Stalin to this day. Mm-hmm. The idea is, we're going to make an airtight society from which there's no escape possible. So this is one of the reasons I went to North Korea, is I think it's impossible for any of us on Earth right now, certainly in the West, to imagine what this was like. Because there's certain things about politics you and all of us don't like, people watching this don't like. We could turn it off. We could read books that are kind of silly, or books that have our political point of view. Maybe it's going to take more work. We could watch YouTube channels, whatever, music, whatever we want. We don't know what it's like where it's 24/7 and everywhere. It's impossible to wrap our heads around this.
And your compliance is required.
Yes.
For survival.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
That's why it's called a totalitarian system,
right.
Because everything is controlled.
It's everything.
Mm. And when you went to North Korea, because I haven't read your book on North Korea, which is a mistake I will rectify over time. But how similar was it in terms of what you saw there to what the Soviet Union would have been like? Is it a modern Soviet Union, is I guess what I'm asking.
It's
North Korea se yaad hai. Today I saw the Facebook profile of a CPM party worker or a supporter, I'm not really sure exactly, a Bengali guy, surname hidden, so he knows the caste narrative is going to bite their ass pretty soon. So his post went viral today, one of those same things that are we really free? So Republic Day hai, so why is there still poverty? He put up some incident about not getting justice for Arjikor or something like that. That some random bad thing in the country means that our Republic Day is a failure. So anyway, I checked out his profile for fun to see where's this guy coming from, what are the entirety of his views. So after that post, the very next post is celebrating someone called Debulina Hemram, the first significant woman leader in CPM in any consequential position. She recently got that post. Fair enough. I thought, okay, it's a standard run-of-the-mill CPIM guy. The very next post is an open stuti of North Korea. And there are countless likes and heart reacts. He's not even being sarcastic about it. He's saying what a great job North Korea has done on education and alleviating poverty and stuff. Open, no shame, no hiding, like no even fear of the possible ridicule that you are an official CPM guy or a CPM supporter, you are defending North Korea. CPM doesn't really want to be North Korea, at least on the face of it. So, and there's no laugh reacts even on the post. Pretty insane stuff in Bengal.
It's not modern because I mean, you laugh, but like the Westerners have this idea that when you go there, it's all like lights, like Broadway. It's beautiful, like Disneyland paradise. There's everywhere you go, something's wrong. So if there's an elevator buttons, one button will be wrong. Every wall has a crack. The smell of mildew is everywhere. Everywhere I went, even on the plane, there's a fly, which is like a biblical symbol of evil. And even in their Central Park, the fountain's not running and it's covered in mildew. You know what I mean? So this sense of decay is pervasive. The books I brought back, you can even smell it in some of the books. So I don't know. There's a big difference, I think, in many ways, because North Korea is nowhere near as powerful as the Soviet Union was. And there's certainly, my friend from St. Petersburg saw my pictures. He's like, this is like St. Petersburg with Russian people, with Asian people. He just blew his mind. So I left the Soviet Union when I was 2, so I can't obviously remember that. But I think there's a lot of parallels, and it's, I think, the closest thing we have to it. Especially the thing that is very similar is this complete sense of, which was a Soviet term, political correctness.
Political correctness. Yeah, so I don't think India can survive without having offensive defense. We have to be hawkish. We have to have imperialistic ambitions. We have to think of reunifying India, Pakistan, POK to as soon as possible, and Nepal, Bhutan, all of this. Bhutan would be probably too much, but there has to be some buffer between China, fair enough. But Nepal, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Pakistan, half of Pakistan leave a buffer zone with Afghanistan, etc. But we can't have this Indian territory right now that we have and hope to just protect it. We have to go outside our borders and then protect this land that we have right now.
Like, they do not want to talk politics because you don't know if you're going to say the right thing or the wrong thing. I remember my mom, who's not politically, politically activated. She'd go, like, it wasn't complicated, because one day this guy is the greatest thing since sliced bread, and the next day he's been a traitor since the beginning, and then 2 years later he's amazing again. And like you don't have to have any intelligence to be like, this doesn't make any sense. So the thing that people don't appreciate with these totalitarian countries, it's not like, all right, if I just say Stalin is wonderful, I'm fine. No, it's that there's other people to talk about. And if I had said 3 years ago, this guy's great, well, now he's been unpersoned and I could be given the death penalty, because 3 years ago, in front of you, you saw me say that he was great. So because the reality constantly changes, you're never on secure footing. And I think that's by design.
Michael, so your book is called The White Pill, and your message is basically things have been really, really bad in the past, and we're very lucky to have what we have. Is that fair?
No.
No, you're looking at me going, no, that's
not the message at all.
What's the message?
I think the message is, no matter the good guys won before, and no matter how dark it gets, there is always hope. And this hope isn't based on some kind of Pollyanna, like, oh, good always wins in the end. It's not true. But here are the receipts that, as dark as what we were talking about happened, they didn't win. And that's something that happened in our lifetimes. And that's something that you can understandably not expect the New York Times to tell you. So if
and then after doing this interview, Trump won in their country. We should have mutual defense treaties with, we at least need military bases in Bangladesh and Pakistan.
These people who had far less than any of us had, and we're up against people who are far more ruthless, far more entrenched, and far more, in many ways, intelligence. If they could do it, we could do it. Who can, not will, can.
So that all being the case, the reason I asked you about it is, what are you and I have talked about this a lot, which is the difficult, and Francis too, by the way, the difficulty of communicating this stuff to people who've never
guys, y'all probably know that Konstantin Kisin is relatively a newcomer in the scene, right? And whereas Michael Malice has been debating about capitalism and why communism, socialism is bad for about 10 years now, in public or in different podcasts and stuff. So you see, Konstantin Kisin, who today comes across, is a phenomenally educated guy, of course, phenomenally articulated, so brilliant debater. So now he is sort of a big shot in the scene as well. And he subconsciously, without being even deliberate about it, he comes across as the big dog in all podcasts these days, but look at his demeanor in front of Michael Malice. This is the inherently the fact that he has massive respect for Michael Malice. That's, I think, coming out. That's showing. It's glowing out. It's coming out without even him thinking about it consciously. That yes, in front of Michael Malice, he's still a newcomer and a kid.
To go into the Devil Wears Prada speech, this stuff.
Yeah, because it's not ideas and it's not facts. It's like it's almost like a felt sense, like some kind of understanding that comes from knowing about these historical things that changes the way you see the world. It just does. If you know this was real and you experience it, even by reading about it, and it changes the way you perceive everything.
Oh yes, for sure.
But the vast majority of people in this country and in the UK and elsewhere have not done that, have not had that. So what are the, like, how do we, I don't even know what I'm asking, like, what are the lessons? How do we communicate them? How do we?
What really drives me crazy is there's the Tinder versus real life, that meme, like what they sell it as than what actually happens.
Right.
I'm not a conservative in any sense. The argument for conservatism is we're the ones who look at the lessons of history, that human beings aren't really that different 2,000 years ago as today, and we apply these long learned historical lessons to contemporary times, and we don't try to reinvent the wheel because it's not possible. And conservatives in practice think
this will be a phenomenal, I think, disagreement and a bit of a debate between Konstantin Kisin and Michael Malice now, because Konstantin Kisin is pretty much a conservative now.
history started a perpetual 20 years ago, right? The left, it's always the left, the left, as if there's one left. The left took over the institutions 20 years ago, and we got to stop them. And then 20 years later, 20 years ago, and they are very intellectually incurious. And I think a lot of conservative pundits and influencers don't talk about history enough. And it's bizarre because I think it behooves anyone. And you don't have to care about politics. History is fascinating. It's just a fascinating field. This is, instead of this works in theory, what happened in real life? What happened when people try this? It teaches about the limits of human evil and the human goodness. And this happened to...
That would teach conservatives that even conservatism fails often.
Not just this, all these stories happen to so many people over so much time. It's just, I think, a fascinating endeavor for anyone who's in the slightest intellectually curious. So I think it's also important for one thing that I call the white pill. The black pill is this idea that it's a wrap. The West or the world is over. This I really hate this Greta Thunberg conservatism that, like, oh, if we lose this election, it's over. It's like, tell that to the people in Poland. Like, tell that to the people in, you know, in Latvia or in Ukraine or Russia, that it's not a wrap. And they were when Margaret Thatcher went to meet Gorbachev, you know, towards the end of her prime ministership, the Foreign Office basically told her, look, nothing's going to change in the Soviet Union. Like, take whatever wins you can get. And then they also gave her like a silver hairbrush as a present for him, even though he's completely bald. And we laugh, but it's just like these people. I'm going to spoil it a little, but since this is history, it doesn't matter. Helmut Kohl, who was the head of West Germany, was meeting with Lech Walesa in Poland. And Lech Walesa is like, I don't think that the Berlin Wall is going to be around for much longer. Helmut Kohl laughed in his face. He goes, look, I'm a lot older than you. Like, I know these things take time. So, and he's like, maybe it fell the next day. The next day, and Helmut Kohl got his German ass on a plane. He said, quote, I'm at the wrong party, and flew back to Germany. So there's this quote about how did you go bankrupt? I think it's Steinbeck or Hemingway, I always forget. Gradually, in two ways, gradually and then suddenly. Amazing things happen, what seem like overnight, because we don't see the parts that built up to it. So, you know, look at one of the things that was very important to me in writing this book, which I didn't understand, is what was the Berlin Wall and why was it such a big deal when it fell? And when you realize this was a wall that imprisoned an entire city, and as one historian put it, it was a deranged prison where the ones on the inside were the ones that were free. And to see you could go on YouTube and see the footage of people dancing and cheering with champagne atop the wall, what that meant. And again, this is 89. This isn't, grainy World War I footage. These are amazing moments of freedom that happen in our lifetime. And I think it's important for all of us to take the wins that we can get.
तो moments of freedom से याद है, I'll show you all a bit of a footage without the audio, of course. Every metalhead has seen this, what I'm going to show. So our bases in Indonesia, Imshastri, they are naval bases, right? Not army bases. And do our navy just chill in the ports, or are they inland as well? What do you think is Hindutva, Hindu conservatism, or Hindu progressivism? There's every bit of it. All of these are there in Hindutva. Hindutva conservatism is pretty much, I think, the mainstream view. There are Hindu progressives like Kushal Mehra, Abhijit Mitra, Harsh Madhusudan. I'm just a Hindutva libertarian who believes both have a right to exist, and both can or may not exist according to their wishes. I'm in favor of fighting is too loaded a term. I don't like to think of myself as a social worker or activist and stuff. I'm looking after my own interest. I want to be rich, prosperous, and still be safe as a Hindu. So for that, libertarianism. But if they want to survive, they should survive. And with libertarianism, all of them can survive without fucking with each other and giving too much theology gan to everyone else. I just don't think Hindu texts matter in the end in terms of how society shapes up to be. Texts are the culmination of decades and years, centuries long narratives on what were once conveniences and the nature around you. That's what is the core difference between Islam and Hinduism. People born in the Middle East are not inherently asshole because of some poison in the water, right? It's just that they are exporting the convenience-based morality that they had to come up with in order to survive in the deserts of the Middle East. And they want to have that same sort of lifestyle in India. Whereas India, having a completely different climate, looks at life completely differently. And therefore, Islam got affected by Hinduism and changed to a certain degree. And hence the calls for reform and stuff repeatedly, because it takes a lot to keep Muslims, truly Muslims in India. The moment the foot of the pedal comes off, they stop being jihadists. And then someone has to remind them that, no, arey, bro, that's not your job. Be a true Muslim as you would have been in Saudi Arabia 1400 years back. So I have no problem with Hindu conservatism, Hindu progressivism. Be that in your own little community. Be as Hindu as possible, or be as Hindu progressive as possible. But the state has to be libertarian.
It's such a profound point, because in many ways, the black pill it's giving up.
Oh yeah,
it's a glorified way of giving up.
It's a way to justify being lazy and cowardly. I hate it with every fiber of my being.
Yeah, because all you can, it's a way to do all of them.
It's a way to justify.
It's in many ways
in our lifetime, and I think it's.
Oh, I forgot. Yeah, so let me show you all a bit of this footage. 1991, Soviet Union has just fallen, and three bands, Metallica, Pantera, and I think Megadeth or someone else got invited to a show in a free concert in an abandoned airfield. That was the biggest, I think, concert of all time, or the biggest metal concert of all time. Probably biggest concert of any kind in Russia. I'll just show you all the footage, okay? Without the audio. It's a beauty, it's a pleasure for the eyes.
Important for all of us.
There are people getting beaten up and stuff all around. See the dates. There are still some policemen. September 28, Tushino Airfield, Moscow, Russia. Do listen to this concert, at least this song. This song is the best one in the concert, Harvester of Sorrow. But look at the crowd, okay? That's when Russia finally gets a taste of freedom. Look at the size of the crowd. Look at the vocalist's guitar. Helicopters running about. Police are doing lathi charge, beating the shit out of random people, beating a bottle at one point just because someone brought a bottle to the concert. This is a concert that will make anybody a metalhead. This drummer came with his grandmother in USA to become a tennis player, picks up drums. Vocalist, his father was a truck driver. Guitarist, half Mexican. Diversity without reservations, guys. Which is why I keep on talking about UFC. At one point, their light heavyweight champion was the richest Muslim athlete of all time. Light heavyweight champion, a black guy. Heavyweight champion, a white guy. Welterweight champion, Nigerian American Muslim. Then middleweight champion, Nigerian New Zealander, black guy. 2-division women's champ, lesbian from Brazil. All of that happened without reservation. Just on competence and merit. Anyway, that's the guitar, guys. That's the guitar here as well. Not the exact same model because I'm poor. I grew up in a socialist third world country. Anyway, let's get back to dark stuff.
Us to take the wins that we can get.
It's such a profound point because in many ways, the black pill it's giving up.
Oh yeah,
it's a glorified way of giving up.
It's a way to justify being lazy and cowardly. I hate it with every fiber of my being.
Yeah, because all you can get it's a way to do all of those things, but you can intellectualize it and point out things and go, but you know what? I'm the smart one, and you're the idiot for having hope.
We recently reached a huge YouTube milestone.
Description
To talk about the issue.
So I'm curious. Let me ask you this, because let's get personal for a second. One of the things that okay, I know that's funny. One of the things in my Russian
Is when you jab your finger in someone's direction and go, let's make this personal.
I wish I had a stiletto right now. One of the things that I talked about this several times, and about the Russian upbringing. There was a show called Russian Dolls, which was a Russian version from Brighton Beach.
Spitting image.
Yeah.
No, it was Russian version of Jersey Shore here in the States. You probably
we have had this misunderstanding on the show before. Okay, anyway, carry on.
So the point is, have we talked about this already? This with the girl in the hair salon?
I don't remember.
Okay, so the audience doesn't remember either. Okay, we memory hole. It's Trotsky. It's memory hole. It never happened. So this girl, she's a young, whatever, college age. She's with her mom. They're in the beauty salon getting the nails done or something. And she goes, she'd been frustrated not knowing what major to have, right? And she took an aptitude test. It said you'd be a good lawyer. And she's like, Mom, I've been struggling at the 4 majors. I'm going to do pre-law. I'm going to be a lawyer, and finally decided. First thing out of her mom's mouth, how are you going to pay for it? And the girl has a breakdown. And if you're an American, you're watching this, like, calm down. Like she's like, why is, and what it really hit close to home, because in how I was raised, and that's what I want to ask you is, whenever you're excited about something, or like this is something, this might lead to something, the first thing from a Russian household is pulling the rug out, like finding a problem. And it's just like everyone who's achieved anything has had to overcome problems. People, no one's figured out how to pay for law school. Like this is some kind of, there's no way there's nothing to Google like this, but it's always.
Healthy families, really, Fiction Gamer. They are raising healthy families. You think our nutrition crops are that good, then why freebies? Then there has to be zero arguments in favor of freebies and stuff. If you think people in villages are raising healthy families, not at all. And it's nice that they have procreated so much, which is why people do take India seriously, because of our population. But it's not like a conscious decision that they made in favor of Hinduism, Hindutva, or the country. They just like to have sex, and think that more kids will help them in the fields and stuff. So being grateful to them has its limits.
Place immediately, like, oh, I went on this date with this chick. Things like, well, what's her background? Where does she live? It's just like, why is that always your first question? Is that what were you raised?
Well, yes and no, but it's funny. We had this guy Mark Wall.
Yes, population is destiny, and I'm thankful for the destiny that they have given us. But unless it was a conscious decision based on duty and stuff, how much am I going to thank them personally? And they are not raising healthy families at all, not remotely.
Walsh on the show a while ago, who's a kind of like psychologist, and we talked about why Russians are the way they are. And I
No, Elon's is a conscious decision, and he's raising healthy babies.
Kept pressing on him, and eventually it just went Russian history. Look at the history. I mean, America is a completely different situation because it's a nation of people who conquered a continent and enjoyed the fruits of that, right? So if you go back only a few generations, really, these are winners. These are people who won. They came, they conquered, and they built a civilization out of nothing. But look at the history of Eastern Europe. It's famine, it's war, it's all the terrible things that can happen to humanity have happened there. And so I think that the reason that people are like that is that, look at what we've just been talking about for the last hour. Imagine living in a society where if you say the wrong word, you're going to get executed. That produces a very different type of human being to one where everyone gives you high five and cheers you on and, you know, all of that.
I've had this conversation
totally
before, but I think it's chicken egg.
No, I don't think it is.
But I get that what your point, but the thing is, you can get to that later. You could have the like, all right, this is exciting, and then like, all right, now let's worry about the threats and the costs. Why is that always the first concern?
Because Americans and their parents and their grandparents didn't grow up in a society where every mistake was likely to be that costly, and the mistakeness or otherwise was so arbitrary and random. Like, yes, if you're conquering this continent, if you go the wrong path, you're going to get killed by Indians or whatever, right? But these were that was a kind of survival of the fittest in an adaptive sense, right? The people who were the most entrepreneurial, the people who were most industrious, the people who were the most driven, the people who were the most capable, they were the ones that survived. But that's not what happened in Russia. In Russia, the people who were the most capable and the most industrious and the most intelligent, they were the ones that were killed off. And you were left with a lot of deeply traumatized people who knew, above all, not ever to rise above their station, not ever to question, not ever to do anything that made them stand out. Whereas this is a country of people who've been trained to stand out. That's why, you know, to us Brits, Americans are like ridiculously confident and everyone thinks they're great at everything and whatever. I just think it's the history of these two countries.
Yeah, I think you're right, and it doesn't make me despise it any less.
Oh, well,
it's so pernicious.
Despise is the wrong word for me, because I think that if someone is deeply traumatized by generations of terrible history, you can understand and have compassion without necessarily thinking it's the right way to be.
Yeah, but I think at a certain point, I have a lot of friends in recovery. At a certain point, you have to own your trauma.
Oh, yeah.
And you have to be like, all right, like this is something, a tendency I have. Let me kind of keep that.
Yeah, this is that idiotic argument like gun rights will lead to school shootings. Meanwhile, gun rights have been in USA since 1791. The school shooting started 15 years back. Okay, don't pretend like you knew this was going to happen. Don't pretend like Americans knew this was going to happen. This was a 10-year-old phenomenon, and it's going away right now. It was done on the basis of market forces, and they thought market was going to reward it. The market didn't reward it, and it's gone now. Reservations are not going away, even if the market doesn't reward it. Stop listening to Hindutwadi socialist YouTubers.
That in check. I'm not there anymore.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. But your point about the black pill, I mean, it's interesting. I think that sometimes people might accuse me of being black pilled, and I'm not black pilled, but I also think there is value in saying that.
Okay, another point. This is what I was saying just in, I think, last night's live stream or the day before's live stream that villagers who think that city folk are weak and confused and about gender and stuff, we village people don't do that. Yes, because that wave of propaganda didn't reach your shores as of yet. Propaganda doesn't reach like this, right? It takes a bit of time. It comes out of USA, reaches Indian universities, then percolates to pop culture, then the urban areas take it up, then it gets glorified so much that the villagers emulate it. And don't pretend like villagers don't want to emulate the officers and the officers don't want to emulate the city. So if most other insane, let's say, non-Indian ideas have percolated to the villages of India, i.e. communism, socialism, why in the fucking world do you think gender ideology would not have percolated to the villages if Trump hadn't won this time and if Modi hadn't won in 2024? You honestly think that Rahul Gandhi and Kamala Harris being the heads of these two countries for 10, 15 years wouldn't have led to gender ideology in villages? Okay, after taking up communism, socialism, they would stop only at gender ideology. That's not how ideologies work. That's not how narratives work.
The path we're heading down is the wrong path. And if we keep going down this path, we'll end up in a bad place.
Of course.
And so the black pillness comes in. For example, the UK is very different to the US in this way.
Oh, yes.
We're sitting here on the eve of the election in which Americans actually have choice.
Sure.
It may not be a great choice,
Sure.
but it's a choice. In the UK, that doesn't exist. If you think like we do, then 14 years of a woke pseudo-conservative government followed by a Labour, not even pseudo-conservative government, there was no choice at the last election. People didn't have one, right? You had a choice of two parties that are basically going to implement a very similar policy. So I think that's why America is different, because you still have choice, you still have opportunity, and you're self-sufficient. You can make your own energy, you can grow your own food, you can build your own stuff. And that's why America has a lot more reason to be optimistic, I think.
Yeah, I am not white-pilled about the UK. One of the things I talk about extensively in this book was the rise of Thatcher in 79. And I think many people, including Brits, don't realize how bad Britain was in the 70s.
Oh, yeah.
They had the winter of discontent. The line I have in the book is they used to say, truthfully, the sun never set in the British Empire, right? Because it spanned the whole globe. You had mandatory blackouts in the 70s.
Right.
You weren't allowed to work to save electricity. The garbage in Leicester Square was 6 feet high. The grave diggers were on strike. Inflation was 20%, something crazy. They would alternate between Labour and Conservatives, and the policies were the same, and nothing was getting done. And it was a given, and this is kind of astrology for men, this whole idea of like cycles of civilization, that like every empire enters a decline. Britain's in a managed decline. Like it's a wrap for us. We're never going to be great again. We're just going to get more and more miserable. And Thatcher's quote was, "I just can't bear to see Britain in decline." Like we were the ones who stood up alone against Hitler and who helped liberate half the
Yeah. And out of the blue, in that dire situation, Maggie Thatcher comes and saves the country. Just like now again, Trump is delaying the demise of USA.
world, and now look at us. And she gave them that sense of hope. And she was, and now at a great cost. I mean, the idea of Thatcher is a lot better than the reality of Thatcher, and tell that to the miners and people in Scotland. Let's be fair, and to the Irish. But point being, the claim that Britain will never have electricity again, and it's only going to get poorer and poorer, or will stay poor, was false. But it was a long, it was a long period of managed decline. Point being, I don't see any trajectory in the near future for Britain for things to turn around.
And on top of that, the difference between the Thatcher period and now is that at least under Thatcher, there was a sense of the British people being one people.
Oh, yeah.
There isn't that sense anymore. Now, well, because we've got the blah, blah, blah community and the blah, blah, blah. And now we're all different communities instead of one people.
Well, no, there was the idea.
And Amartya Sen advocated against multiculturalism in England, never in India.
Of the unions versus everybody else. That was a thing. So there was some division there, and certainly Scotland, Ireland versus Great Britain. There's always division, but yeah, there seems to be a consensus in Britain among the people. This is where, we have talked about this off air. The consensus is towards more tyranny. Like the people want the cage.
Yeah.
And that is something that under, in 78 and then 79, the Tory slogan, which Saatchi came up with, was just 3 brilliant words: labor isn't working. So they had the photos of the queues of people getting relief. And it's just like, there's an alternative. There, to your point, there is no alternative. It seems to be, it's just going to get more and more dictatorial. So I feel, as someone who identifies to some extent as an Anglophile, I definitely feel for what your country is going through. And I think it's going to get worse before it gets better.
But there's also the note of the white pill, which is
we could have communism.
Yeah.
No, white pill's hope, not optimism.
Yeah, but there is
Michael,
a chance. There are people who can come to the fore, just as Thatcher did.
Oh, sure.
I'm
just saying it's going to take a minute.
It is going to take.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's going to take longer than a minute, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But I agree with you, and hopefully, look, we all hope, because with the way things are going, is not ideal. Shall we say?
It's just heartbreaking for me as someone who has so much affection for Britain and what the British have accomplished, to see just that footage. Everyone knows this clip of a guy with his camera on his phone in his house, and this lady cop is telling him explicitly, "You're being arrested for a Facebook post," or whatever it was, social media thing. And you're watching this, and it's just like it's easier for me to wrap my heads around the rioting in 2020. Every country's had rioting, since America was started because of rioting. But to watch that, and it's just like, holy crap, where did you take such a wrong turn? And not only that, it's that when you see this footage, that there isn't this national, like, hold on, whoa. Because one of the things, and I hate praising him because it's such a boomer thing to do, but one of the things Martin Luther King did that was brilliant is he's like, all right, we're going to force people to face the consequence of what they're preaching. You're for segregation, you're for racism. Okay, you're going to see men and women in suits getting attacked by dogs and shot with fire hoses. Is this what you want? And many people who are still prejudiced looked at it and goes, so this is a bridge I'm not comfortable crossing. Let's take a step back. And the fact that footage went wide, and other examples, I think there was a guy who had a sign that said Hamas, a terrorist organization, was tackled by the cops. The fact that the Union Jack is regarded as a symbol of racism and hatred in your own country. My God. I was in Japan in April, and one of the things that I really didn't want to, because I hate anime and I hate weeaboo culture. I'm like, don't make me fall in love with you guys. I completely fell in love with Japan because it was so great to be in a country which had national pride. They love Japan. They love being Japanese. They're proud of what they built. They take pride in themselves and their work and everything else. They're actually much poorer than Westerners in many ways because of this, but they still have this sense of pride. And this is something that I think Britain, how could you not? Have you guys ever talked to Dankula?
Yes.
I've had Dankula on my show a couple of times. Like, the Scots, the amount that this little island brought to the entire world is so disproportionate. Like, you guys should be like just talking about Scotland, Scots to this, Scots to that. The fact that they're not taught this Scottish pride is, as someone who's never stepped foot in Scotland, is crazy to me and just downright reprehensible.
Michael Malice comes out in favor of pride.
That's going to be the thumb.
We'll have a little LGBTQ.
LGP.
Okay. Ankit Shah fan here. So tell me, what is Western imported capitalism versus Indian imported capitalism? Bharat is strong because of temple economy. Look at Mahakumbh in our Prayagraj. Where was it up until 1991? Where has it been since 1991? When has Mahakumbh not happened? What is different about Mahakumbh in Prayagraj this time, except that it's come after 144 years? What's the economics of it? Why is that different? And why is that economics different from whatever is Western imported capitalism? There is no Western imported capitalism and Marx imported capitalism and Indian exported capitalism. There is just a government who will either be small or big, and there will be different degrees of small government versus big government. There is nothing else, no matter how many Sanskrit names you put on top of it.
No, there's going to be trans and queers there, you fucking bigot.
Yeah. Stop being racist.
Trans and queers. Okay, got it.
Trans and queers, exactly. All right, on that happy note, head on over to. Oh no, wait, we've got the final question.
Oh,
We've got a final question, the one we always ask, which is, what's the one thing we're not talking about, Michael, that we should be?
That's a great question. What are we not talking about that we should be? Can I think about this? Because I think it's a very important
I think it's
question.
important you think about it, Michael.
What is the one thing we're not talking about? What are we not talking about that? Is democracy a system that is compatible with freedom, or is inherently or even in any way freedom seeking?
You did a Kamala thing there. Did you notice that?
No.
Extra slow, like, you would like, is democracy
Well, I wanted to word it correctly instead of talking word salad.
that's what she does.
But she doesn't get to
Well, she might be president by the time we're talking about this, so you
No,
shut
she
your
can't.
mouth.
It's going to air in January. Biden might die. You might
yeah.
right. That's fair. It's true. Am I wrong? I think the funniest outcome. We were recording this before. Someone said to me, "There's a line that the funniest outcome is most likely." The funniest outcome is Trump gets elected and she becomes president before January. That's the funniest. So the first female president's there for like 2 months.
Wait, Trump gets elected,
Right, but he's
but
only
Biden dies,
Yeah,
or
and
and
she
not-
becomes.
incapacitated. He doesn't have to die,
Right.
but she becomes president. Yeah.
Well, there is the other possibility, which is there is a very small possibility that they both get 269 votes.
Yes.
In
it's
which
very
case, the
unlikely.
House.
There is no Western imported capitalism versus Desi capitalism, but as for your second question, like wearing a Gucci versus wearing Sridhar's, this is a recurring idea of mine that I've discussed with some friends of mine that, what will capitalism make your country look like? That will be, of course, different based on the local culture and stuff. India, pretty much because of its diversity and size, very much is a steampunk society. Those of you who know that genre, put your hands up. So you all know cyberpunk these days. I think cyberpunk was created with the movie Blade Runner, right? Then it became a very popular genre for different manga, anime, now video games. The cyberpunk idea is that world, it's hundreds of years in the future. Mankind has become interstellar. All the rich people live in different nice comfortable planets. Only the poorest and the criminals have been left behind on Earth. That's the cyberpunk dystopian idea. Steampunk is I'll have to show you some steampunk pictures. Steampunk is very much India. Steampunk is where modern technology arrives, people are prosperous, but our ways somewhat remain Indian in some specific ways. So steampunk has been so far approached only in the some photo shoots, and there are one or two movies like World Machine or something. I don't remember the movie name exactly. It was the background score was done by Junkie XL. Global Engines or World Engines sort of a thing. So this is steampunk. Imagine this. Cyborg hand, but with ancient medieval European hats and those glasses. Or think of a horse carriage, maybe. A horse carriage where the horses are genetically mutated, artificially bred horses. And inside you have GPS tracker and stuff, but you are still in a horse carriage. That sort of situation.
And the Senate get to pick one, and potentially you could have not Joe Biden. You could have Donald Trump as president and Tim Walz as his vice president.
I don't know
That would be funnier.
I don't think that they would put Walz as VP.
Don't you?
Who would they put as
They'd
VP?
probably put her, right?
Donald Trump president, his president.
Would that be
is
smart
Kamala
to put
Harris.
hers too? And because there's plenty of people who got their finger on the trigger.
That'd be incredible.
Yes.
Well, let's hope it's happened by the time this airs.
You want Trump to be assassinated? Holy
No.
crap.
No.
Wow, we all heard it. Listen to this queer. My God.
I meant her being his vice president. Head on over to Substack where we might ask Michael your questions.
I think we have a bit of time. Let's check out this debate then. I really like this one. Let's check out his debate on libertarianism versus big government and state on Lex Friedman's podcast.
No.
This is fascinating. This is fabulous. Yes, our Steampunk is making reels, and that's pretty much it. The game Dishonored is the best steampunk depiction till date. What's the movie I'm talking about, though, guys? Can anyone think of it? Junkie XL did the background score. It was one of Junkie XL's first scores that he was credited fully for. Like, he pretty much did the background score for Batman vs Superman, but it was credited because he was assisting Hans Zimmer up until that point. Since Deadpool, he started getting credit for the complete movie. What was the movie name? Something World Engine or something like that, where the entire city used to turn into a vehicle and move around. Okay, that was the story. We'll watch this debate now. Let me take a stretching and push-up break, and by that time, you check out a bit of my music. Where did my stuff go? What the fuck? Why can't I play it? Okay, anyway. Oh.
So let's put this on the table. Speaking of, so let's put
so this is the guy who's going to interview Narendra Modi now.
this on the table. Speaking of naive, I still, more than the two of you by far, I think, have faith that government can work. Okay, let's put that on the table.
I got it. I'm not trying to be pedantic. What do you mean work? government can achieve goals. That is not in dispute.
Can achieve goals effectively to build a better world,
Okay.
a functioning society.
So I'm going to take it one step further than you.
Oh boy.
The only way to achieve a better world is through government.
So this is a very good question. Shoman Balti is asking, what's your view on Swadeshi movement using only Indian goods, etc.? Actually, Ravi Thakur opposed that movement because he thought it will destroy local shops who survive on Videshi goods. No, that's not how boycotts work. Boycotts push the market to do a certain kind of thing. And in that situation, shops who survive on Videshi goods would suffer some temporary losses and then stop selling Videshi goods. So veganism entirely stands on this idea, boycott, that yes, I can't expect the government to ban meat all of a sudden for me, but I'll keep on boycotting and convince and persuade more people to boycott it so that people see the losses in meat industries or see the profits in vegan foods and stuff. Therefore, more people get into that business and vegan food becomes cheap, or even vegetarian food becomes healthier, and that's how society moves away. The only problem with it is, of course, that unless everyone is on board, it never works. And how can you hope that everyone will be on board? So right now, if we use just Swadeshi products, we already have so much protectionism. It will lead to more protectionism, and Indian businesses will probably secretly fund Swadeshi movements so that they can get away with making lower quality stuff.
Michael, what do you think about that?
He almost dropped, and I said it on purpose that way.
No, I'm
you
glad that
cannot-
the mask is dropping.
You cannot have liberty or freedom without a government. Now, not anything like the governments we have today. So I think the idea that you can have liberty or freedom without government is the rejection of the idea of liberty and freedom. And the undermining of any effort, any attempt to do it. So in that sense, I agree with
he's sitting
you,
right here, right?
Lex. I know exactly. On this, I'm in agreement with Lex.
Yeah,
Which is unusual.
that government
you're
is good for
you're
freedom.
agreeing with the guy who's reading Mein Kampf.
Who's-
That's not a
who's-
surprise.
Who's dressed in black?
Yeah.
That's the bad guys.
No, the fascism. I mean, the road to fascism is anarchy. It's not
What the hell are you talking about? Can you
anarchy.
give me one example where anarchy led to fascism?
Well, every example of
Never.
stateless society leads to authoritarianism.
No.
Every single one in all of human history.
And
Never.
It has to, because
Wait, you're
because
saying
it
Weimar
has to.
Germany was anarchy?
Well, it wasn't pure anarchy, but it got close. But no,
It got
I didn't
close
say.
to
I said the
anarchy?
reverse, by the way.
Okay,
I said
go
the
ahead.
reverse. I didn't say that every form of authoritarianism started with anarchy. I said that every situation in which human beings lived under anarchy led to authoritarianism. So I said the flip. results.
Anarchism isn't a location. Anarchism is a relationship. The three of us are in an anarchist relationship. Every country is in a relationship of anarchy toward each other. The U.S. and
This is so well done. This debate is so well explained and so fruitful.
Canada have an anarchist relationship toward one another. And to claim, when going back to Emma Goldman, who I love, in 1901, William McKinley, President McKinley, was shot by this guy, Leon Salgas. And it was very funny because he was a crazy person. And they arrested him. He shot the president. And they go, "Why did you shoot President McKinley?" And he just goes, "I was radicalized by Emma Goldman." And she's like, "Oh, God damn it." So now she's on the lam. She had nothing to do with this guy. She's trying to flee. She gets arrested. They caught her. And she said, and this is the hubris of this woman, which I admire as the subject of ego and hubris. She goes, "I'd like to thank the cops for doing what they're doing. They're turning far more people into anarchism than I could do on my own." So
Yeah, so many people becoming libertarians because of Nirmala Sitharaman. M. Shastri, that's not necessarily the case. Yes, that's true in government's case. And capacity, capability, even Indian government has. There's no intent. Capacity, capability is there. Intent is not there because of the brainwashing of social justice and reservation and historical injustices crap. And that too, half historical injustice, no reparations for jizya. A.R. Rahman is not giving me his Raleigh seaboard anytime soon. So, but in an ideally, not ideally, let's say, but in a hypothetical stateless society, it could still have free speech, because it would be small guilds and small localities, small private companies, and private companies for roads, private companies for law enforcement, private companies for law adjudication, etc. There. So I guess some neighborhoods would have free speech, some neighborhoods wouldn't have free speech, etc. And people would be subscribing to different sets of laws as well. So we are not talking about a completely stateless society, but if at all it was, it could be.
Given everything you've said in these 2 hours, and then to pivot to being anti-government is being anti-liberty, I don't feel I have to say anything.
Well,
That's
okay.
fine.
For people who are not familiar, if you're, I don't know why you would not be familiar, but Michael Malice talks quite a bit about the evils of the state and government, and espouses ideas that anarchism is actually, what is it, the most moral system, the most effective system.
First of all, we don't have free speech in law, and then that free speech was, of course, not protected. The job of the government, if I'm not asking for anarcho-capitalism right now, what I'm asking for is protection of life, liberty, and property. And there was no life, liberty, and property. There were no casual gun rights, and there was no precedence of strict law enforcement that would have made those killers think twice before killing Kanhaiya Lal. So none of it is the fault of anarchism or capitalism, really.
For
Sure, all
human relationships.
There's this great book called Atlas Shrugged, and the author posits an anarchist private society. She calls it Galt's Gulch, where everything is privately owned and no one is in a position of authority over anyone else other than the landowner. That's an anarchist society.
There's one judge, and one authority.
Yeah, and that's
So
what
if you
everyone.
violate
Hold on, and that's what
those
everyone.
rules.
And that's what everyone has voluntarily moved there and agreed to be under.
It's a very
It-
small community, right?
Sure,
That is right. So I have no problem with competing governments.
that's
As
the
long
definition
as-
of anarchism.
What's that?
That's the definition of anarchism. Case closed. Okay, end
No,
the
no,
show.
no, no,
End
no.
the show. I got him over.
Not
Mission
definition.
accomplished.
Not definition of anarchy at all. I'm all for competing
Hold on,
governments.
You get more cookies. Good job. He did it. He did it. Yay, Aaron! You brought him over.
More Lithuanian.
What is this
Sounds
class?
Lithuanian. That's my people.
Тульский, Ясная Поляна, медом, с honey.
It's honey.
No claims of health or nutrition.
The other one claimed health. This one no claims.
This
No,
makes
I'm
no
for
claims.
competing governments on different
This is good.
geographic areas. That's fine.
Why does it have to be over? Okay, let me.
It's really crucial that it's on different. So you don't have two judges in Gold Gulch. You have one, and there's a reason. There's one authority. There's one system of laws in Gold Gulch that all the people under the Gulch
There's two.
abide by. There's one.
There's two because they're in America.
No,
So
they're
there's-
not. The whole point is they're not, right?
They're not
So
in America. They're in Colorado.
I know, but the whole point of the novel is they've left America.
They haven't left America,
They've hid themselves, so they're not under the authority of the American.
but they are. Don't
But
you
they're
get
not.
it?
But they're
It-
hidden.
they're
They're
not.
supposed to
Hold
be
on,
The whole
completely
point
hidden.
is that they're hidden, so
Stop.
they're not under the
No.
guys.
If the three of us hide, we're still under the authority of Washington.
No, but not if they
But
don't know.
but this
that
is
we
why they
exist.
haven't established a state, and it's not a government, and it's not in that sense, an example of really the way we form societies. It is a private club that is hidden away from everybody else.
Fine. I'm fine with that. What happens if an American kills a Canadian in Mexico?
What happens in American? It depends on the nature of the governments of the three places.
So
Right. But
there's-
usually what happens in most of human history is that America will launch a war either against Mexico or Canada.
Okay, just first of all,
Right? So usually violence results in much more violence. Anarchy is just a system that legalizes violence. That's all it does. And in international affairs, that's the reality. The reality is that the way you resolve
And legalized violence is the first way to quell more violence. People just stop being violent because the repercussions are going to hit you in the face pretty soon. Shoman Balti is asking also, I want to know your views on modern nation state concept because I saw your podcast with Dr. Kaushik Ganguly where he seemed to have a problem with that. See, now nation state concept has arrived, like Jyoti Basu said, when he first opposed computers, right? And when computers did arrive, he said that, imagine if your daughter comes home pregnant before getting married, you'll have to accept her no matter what, right? The nation state concept has arrived on our doorsteps, so we make the best of it as much as possible. And we want a nation state. That is why in the end we got invaded, because the other side operates like a nation. We were not operating like a nation, which is why I'm not sold on the anarcho-capitalist idea, because anarcho-capitalism, like communism, works only if each and every one in the whole world buys into that idea. I'm saying that be imperialist as fuck, have buffer zones, have military bases all around the neighborhood and the enemy neighborhoods and stuff. But inside the country, there has to be end to freebies and tremendous business, and merit has to be worshipped. Dada, free speech is practical only in Hindutva Sarkar. We need government like China to preserve our culture. No, I agree with your first part of the first part, your first sentence, of course, that free speech is practical only in Hindutva Sarkar. Now, if you say we have a Hindutva Sarkar right now, then even Kanhaiyalal's speech wasn't protected. He didn't have free speech. He died for it. Free speech is possible only in a libertarian Hindutva Sarkar. And government like China to preserve our culture, no, bro, it never works. It can't work in India. I'm not saying it's a good thing or a bad thing. I'm saying it's not even a feasibility versus non-feasibility question. It's just that China and India are fundamentally different because of the diversity. And the diversity, the heterogeneity, is a big, big game changer for countless numbers of things. Cultural, racial, religious homogeneity is what China has. We have none of those three things.
Disputes that are major disputes is through violence.
Ayn Rand said the definition of a government is an agency that has a monopoly of force in a geographical area.
That's right.
So you can't complain that anarchism is legalizing violence when the definition of government, according to Rand, is legalized violence.
No, but because you're taking the definition of violence the way she defines it, right? In this context, she talks about retaliatory force only, and
has that ever happened?
That's not the point.
That is the point.
Before there was Aristotle, was it in Aristotle? Before there was in America, was it in America? The fact that something has never existed means that it will never exist before. The fact that the ideas haven't been developed to make something exist means that it will never exist before. We're young. Human race is a young race. The ideas of freedom are very young. The ideas of the Enlightenment are just 250 years old. The idea that you can't create the kind of government Ayn Rand talked about, I talk about, that it's never been before means it'll never happen again. That's a silly argument.
It's not a silly argument. It's you're being a Platonist. And
No, not at all.
I'll explain to you how you're being exactly a Platonist.
So if I was sitting in 1750 arguing with Thomas Jefferson, he was telling me what kind of state he was going to create. And I said, is a state like this ever been created? And he said, no. Was I being a Platonist? Of course not.
No, you're being
things change.
You're being a Platonist now. Here's why you're being a Platonist now. Because one of the things that Aristotle believed in, one of the things that Ayn Rand in other contexts believed in, the cover of her book, The Philosophy Who Needs It, is, I think it's the Sistine Chapel, the cover, or wherever it is. It's Aristotle and Plato walking.
No, it's not. Yeah, but
what's that painting?
Yeah,
I forget what it is.
It's School of Athens.
School of Athens. Thank you.
It's
so Plato's pointing toward the heavens while they're talking, and Aristotle's pointing to the earth.
Reality.
So, reality.
Absolutely.
So if you want, there's two approaches. There's the Descartes Cartesian approach, which is I sit in my armchair and I deduce all of reality. Or if I want to study the nature of man, if I want to study the nature of dogs, if I want to study the nature of the sun, I have to look around. I have to open my eyes. I have to look at data. It's very difficult. When Rand was on Donahue, he asked her about, aren't you impressed with the order in the universe? And she goes, oh, now you have to give me a moment. And the point she made, which was very hard for many people to grasp, it's hard for me to grasp, is one's concept of order comes from the universe. You can't have a disorderly universe because order means describing that which exists and which has existed.
Sure.
Now, if you are looking at governments throughout history that have always existed, and when you were on Lex, you said, what I'm talking about has never existed.
That's right.
To say that this, therefore, that has a possibility of working in reality, I think is certainly not a point in that favor, number one. And number two, Jefferson was a fraud. What Jefferson argued how America would look did not come true. Jefferson's concerns about the Constitution were accurate. And the fact is the federal government did become centralized, did become a civil war. So if you told Mr. Jefferson, our government you're positing can't work, you would have been correct.
That's not what I'm saying. It's not the issue of can it work or not. It's the issue of can something exist that hasn't existed in the past. It's a silly argument. Now we can argue about the facts of reality whether such a thing can exist, but to say it hasn't existed in the past is not an argument about whether it can exist in the future. But that's the argument you made.
But no, you're talking about history and now you're dancing around it.
No, I'm not.
Yes, you are.
I'm saying that something different happened in the founding of America. It might not have been perfect, might not have been ideal. It might have been, some people even think it was bad, right?
Sure, it
but
was
something different happened.
Sure.
And you could have sat 20 years before and said, well, that's never happened before, so it can't happen in the future. That is a bad argument. It's not a good argument. Irrelevant.
No, but you're making the argument that just because something hasn't happened before, that's certainly not a point to say it's likely to happen or possible.
No, I'm saying, first of all, I agree that everything we know about what's possible or what's not possible has to be from reality. That we agree completely. I think anarchists completely evade that point. I think you guys live in a world of mythology, of abstraction, of Descartes. To imagine the kind of anarchy that David Friedman or Rothbard describe. It's complete fiction. It's complete.
It's just name calling.
Mysticism.
Okay, let me ask just a few dumb questions. So first of all, what do we do with violence in terms of just natural emergence of violence in human societies?
Sure.
So the idea that anarchism proposed.
No, fiction gamer, completely wrong. What power do you think the government doesn't have now that once given will finally bear better fruits and better results? Legally speaking, what exactly can't they do right now, except putting people in jail for disrespecting Hindu gods and stuff? Even that's theoretically possible. Umar Khalid is in jail. So what exactly is stopping them legally from doing the things that you want them to do? So unless you have bought into the Kool-Aid of the age-old socialist trap that, yes, up until now, whatever power they had, up until now, whatever bureaucracy we had, it didn't work, but a little more and then it will bear fruit. It doesn't work that way.
Is that we would.
Why the fuck would we need to change the constitution to remove Waqf Act, Places of Worship Act? We can get them removed tomorrow in Parliament. And if 240 seats, majority in both houses, if that can't get these things passed, then why even have a parliament? Narendra Modi can work from home. Why even need China? All Narendra Modi needs is a laptop from home.
But as the community grows, there may be violence, and then we together form collectives that sort of fund mechanisms that resist that violence. I mean, I'd love to sort of talk about violence because that seems to be the core thing. That's the difference between the state that definitionally, I guess, is the thing that has a monopoly on violence or controls violence in such a way that you don't have to worry about it. And then the anarchism, I don't know.
I'm just laughing because
I'm using bad words.
No, your definition is accurate, but the point is that being the definition of the state versus how states act in reality is just absurd. Yeah.
So, and then the idea that anarchism would be is that it's more kind of a market of defenses against violence. So you have like security companies, and then you hire different.
Yeah, right now we pay for police officers who don't protect us, and then the rich people who can afford have private security anyway. So why not cut out that waste of police officers and everyone have private security directly. Everyone should be able to afford private security anyway.
Ones that
You
are
have
more competent.
you have things being made affordable. You have more accessibility to security. You have accountability when people misuse their power,
Right.
and you have more layers of security than having a government monopoly. Every objectivists understand, and they don't deny this. This is something they talk about constantly. Is anytime you have a government monopoly, it's going to have enormous distortions as a consequence. It's going to be expensive. It's going to be ineffective. And when you're talking about ineffectiveness in markets, that's not just, like the cup sucks. It often means mass death. It often means persecution. So this is something that anarchism, if not entirely prevents, certainly mitigates enormously.
So can I just, as a thought experiment,
Sure.
say it was very easy to immigrate to another country, like where you could just move about from government to government.
Sure.
Would that alleviate most of the problems that you have towards the state, which is like people being free to choose which government they operate under? Wouldn't that essentially
Ask him. Yeah.
So like, I'm trying to understand why governments aren't already the thing that's the goal of anarchism. The kind of collectives that emerge
But
under anarchism
okay,
seems to
I
be
see what you're
what
saying.
government.
You're equating two terms.
Yeah.
So there's something called like private governance and there's government. So for example,
Right.
if I go to Yaron's house and he has a rule, take off your shoes, become your house. If you want to really be kind of silly about it, you could say he's the governor. But it's really nonsensical to say that. If you go to Macy's,
If you want a real life example of how how a society that's completely privatized, every aspect of it is privatized by someone or the other would run. Think of a shopping mall, which has its own laws, regulations. It's at the moment, of course, some laws supersede its own laws, but think of a mall as a microcosm of a nation. There are caste systems even inside that. Some shops are frequented by a section of the society and some shops are frequented by other sections of the society. So anyway, there's some amount of unity and there's a large amount of diversity as well. And can anyone in their honest minds say that a mall runs worse than any city or any district or any state? That's the difference between an organization or a piece of land being run by someone who is accountable to his shareholders, or it's his own money that he's put in and can't afford leakages, versus someone running the government, i.e. the bureaucrats, who are not accountable and who are not the direct stakeholders even. They are hired by us to be the third party. They are the third party non-stakeholders, and they are the ones running the society.
right? If you want to return your sweater, Macy's rules are right up there. You have 7 days. If you don't have a receipt, you're going to get store credit. If you do have a receipt, you get a refund. So every organization, every bar, every nightclub, your house has rules of governments. It's often they're unspoken. This is unavoidable. No one in America, by law, has to pay a tip.
No, gravity, there's going to be no point of that, because think of in a hypothetical situation where West Bengal has brilliant law and order because of West Bengal police, and let's say a Bengali Javier Milei is running the state, beautiful law and order in the state, and Rahul Gandhi comes in center, and then his bullshit police force bypasses the state. Then what?
But it's just customary. You go with the waiter, you give him 15, 20%, so on and so forth. Now, what anarchism does is it says, okay, security is something that is of crucial, essential human need. We all need to be safe in our property, safe in our purpose. The organization that by far is the biggest violator of this, and always has been, always will be, is the government. Why? Because it's a monopoly, because it has no accountability. And look at the rioting last year, right? If you have one agency, pretend it's not the government, pretend it's Apple. and Apple has in charge of security in this town. People are rioting, people are looting, and Apple says, yeah, we're not going to send people into work. And if you try to defend yourself, we're going to put you in jail as well. That's the problem of having a government monopoly, and that's something that anarchism solves for.
So, okay. But don't you, because you said no accountability,
Right.
Don't you mean to say poor accountability?
No, I mean to say no accountability.
I mean, but isn't that the idea of democracies?
I'm not for democracy.
No, not for democracy, but like the system of governments that we have, there is a monopoly on violence, but there is I mean, at least in the ideal, but I think in practice as well, there's an accountability.
I do not think.
I know
that's the
you're a
case.
critic of the police force and all those kinds of things, but the military is accountable to the people.
I do not
The
agree.
police force is accountable
not
to the
agree.
people.
They're not accountable.
Perhaps imperfectly.
I do
but
not-
you're saying not at all.
Not at all. And we've
Not
seen
at
many
all.
examples of police officers doing horrific things on video, and they don't even lose their pensions.
But there's a lot of amazing police officers, or no?
I mean, no, they're not.
So you're saying by nature, police is like a fundamentally flawed system.
No, by nature, government monopoly on police is a fundamentally irredeemable system. We talk.
M. Shastri, how does a state where everyone is talking about Hamare Chacha Vidhayak hai, a state with insane amounts of reservation and freebies and politician connections, how is that an anarchist society? Any random acts of gundagardi is not anarchism.
About private security. If I have a private security firm, you could have that under a government, and as a result of my private security,
Gravity, there are already places like that in USA.
my person who I'm bodyguarding gets shot. That's going to be very bad for my company as compared to competing companies. However, when you have a government monopoly and I get people shot, what are you going to do?
So the problem is that all the examples are going to be within the context of an existing government. This is why I said the cell phone example and all these other examples of us being here.
Nope. Only in name. The people who are in charge there have political connections. They have political connections because the political party who gives them the power, they have that power to give to those gundas.
We're not in anarchy. That is absurd. We're under a particular system of law, and the system of laws applies, and we know that the particular system of laws applies. So the problem is when you have
There are many laws that we're not going to be enforced, that we're not
sure,
really subject
we know
to.
that.
Violence
We know
related?
that. No, there are lots of laws that are not going to be enforced. Right. That doesn't make this anarchy because there are the laws out there. They could be enforced, which makes an enormous business. But look, there's a number of issues here. There's an issue of the role of force in
Okay. Why is price hike the first concern? If price hikes are unaffordable by the people, then they won't be making any money themselves. No one can buy their products. Someone or the other will come up to undercut them. And if they, let's say, kill the guy who wants to undercut them by forming a cartel, then who do the people buy the services and products from?
in human
I
society.
got to clarify thing because I think you misunderstood what I said. I'm not saying that America is anarchist. What I'm saying is the three of us have an anarchist.
Nope, that's not anarchy because they are not enforcing their rules out of the blue. Their power is not derived from divine entities. Their power to enforce their own rules comes from the party running the state, not the other way around. They are being given those lands, bad lands, to run it according to their own wishes because of other political compulsions.
Relationship between us because none of us have authority over the others. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But that's a bad use of the word anarchy.
Real estate prices hike up only when there are price controls and stuff. And if real estate prices go up and people can't afford it, then again it comes down. In Mumbai, people can still afford it.
No, that's the correct use of the word anarchy.
It makes it meaningless. It makes it every time any people get together.
Yes, and the power to enforce their own rules is being given to them by people who are insanely powerful.
They have an anarchistic
Power is being transferred to them.
relationship.
Yes.
No, we have
That's
a
the basis of
voluntary
humanity.
relationship.
That's what anarchism means,
No.
voluntarism.
No,
Yeah,
it doesn't. It's
How is a Taliban state an anarchist state?
it's a
You
political
want to get a
system.
dictionary out?
You're taking a word and it's accepted usage.
Nope, the Gunda has been given the authority by the state.
and then you're
like
saying, oh no,
you
it
mean
means
like selfishness.
maybe, and we never finished that discussion. We're taking a word that you're defining as and replacing it with voluntary. Now,
Okay, fine. I'm not for anarchism or voluntarism. Fine, go ahead.
but let's understand what voluntary means, right? So we, for example, go into stores and there's a certain relationship that we have with the store that we engage in certain voluntary transactions with that store. Now, I believe that works because there is a certain system of law that both the store and we have accepted.
And it's still the country where everyone wants to emigrate. Still the country where people want to emigrate legally, illegally, have their kids, go for a trip and have babies. What about a dystopian for American dream? What transfer? Is Gunda citing constitution when he engages in Gundagiri? No, the permission to not cite the constitution when doing Gundagiri has been given to him by the district magistrate, the MLAs, etc. Their absence is a conscious decision there. The absence of the district magistrate, the absence of the MLA is a conscious decision. Okay. And therefore, it has tipped the balance in favor of the Gundas. If it was truly anarchic, then there would not be any Gundagiri because there would not be any district magistrate or MLA to bypass. MLAs and district magistrates are allowing them to bypass themselves because of political compulsions.
That makes that possible. Now, if that didn't, there are certain people who would like to walk into their store and
Nope. It's all political compulsions.
just take the stuff, right? So there is we might not, but there are certain people who might want it to go into their store. There's a certain system of laws that regulates the relationship and that defines the property rights and then provides protection for the property rights. Now, you would like all that privatized. Yeah. That is, the store would have its police force. And
not following laws is not anarchy. Not having laws is anarchy.
That would be privatized. Now, I don't believe that force can be privatized. And there are many reasons.
Shouldn't.
I don't think it can. And I don't think, I think it's
That's an interesting distinction.
I don't think it can because I think
as long as they have the legal power to enforce law and they are not enforcing because of the political compulsions, because of the local MLA whose insane power has been transferred to his local lackeys, that's political compulsion and not anarchy.
That it's an unstable equilibrium, right? I don't think competing police forces can work. At the end, the police force with the biggest gun always wins and always takes over.
That's not true.
And
because
becomes
look at
authoritarian.
Vietnam, look at Iran and Iraq, excuse me. We had the bigger guns. We didn't win. Look at Afghanistan.
We didn't win partially because none of that is an example of anarchy.
No, but you just said the guy with the biggest gun is going to win.
Yeah, the guy with the biggest gun.
We didn't win in Vietnam. We had the bigger guns.
But again, you're taking it outside of a context. That was a context in which countries are fighting, not a context in which there is no country.
Okay, let's suppose you, Yaron, have a rocket launcher.
Yes.
And there's 100 people with handguns. How are you going to win?
No, the ground reality is that Bihar runs on freebies, reservation, and huge amounts of MLA and district magistrate power, which they don't use for good things. They use it to transfer it to the gundas on the ground.
You have the biggest gun.
Oh, believe me, I could win.
With one rocket launcher against 100 people?
Yeah, it's a good. Well, it depends how many rockets I have in the rocket launcher and whether I'm willing to use them. But so now it's democracy because there are more of them that they win. Look, any one of these scenarios, all it does. So let's go back to the store. So
this is fascinating, by the way. I'm really enjoying this. I just want to say that this is great. Because
I'm glad you are.
I am enjoying the pain,
and I'm also enjoying the comments that are going to happen.
Oh, the comments are going to be overwhelmingly on your side.
I don't think so.
People like
I don't
honesty.
think so.
No, I think the anarchy position is completely dishonest.
I'm a modern day. What's his name? What's the guy who was defending communism?
Richard Wolff.
I'm a modern day Richard Wolff.
There's a sense in which I think anarchists are evading reality in the same sense. The
Gunda doesn't deliver it, but there is the promise of welfare. That's what is giving the Gunda the power. With great responsibilities comes great power. Think of an upside down Spider-Man.
Oh, so we've got this.
Do you think I'm dishonest or delusional?
I think
calling someone dishonest is a really specific.
True.
No, that is not anarchy. That's Bihar.
I think you're delusional.
I think you're delusional, and I'm going to give you the benefit of a doubt of being delusional.
Okay, good.
And
that's fair.
We all
That's
love
fair.
each other
And as I
What
said,
is love?
and as I said on the show, on the previous interview, I said only smart people can be anarchists because it requires.
No, the promise is what gives him the power. The promise is the source of the power. Gunda is not promising welfare. He is asserting raw power based on the fact that his party can give him freebies and reservation.
As a certain level of abstraction of being divorced from reality that
What is the very definition of anarchy?
is hard for people who are actually connected
But
to reality.
he makes a good point.
That there are laws and people are not following the law. That's the vision of anarchy according to people who hate libertarianism and stuff, not according to libertarians.
Because I always talk about this with people on social media, and they talk about a lot of people who buy into the corporate media narrative and how they're dumb. I go, it's easier to train smart people than dumb people. It's easier to convince smart people of the systemic that's divorced from reality than somebody's dumb.
They can deal in abstractions.
Yeah.
They don't have to deal with it.
The power of the Gunda comes from the MLA whom he is hired by. The MLA who is promising freebies, who comes to power because of that. The MLA has insane amounts of power. Take away the power of the MLA, take away the power of the district magistrate, and you will see that the Gunda does not have power anymore.
With the concretes that actually happen. This is an example I gave debating another anarchist. So
Who was it? She must have sucked.
Well,
they
you
were
are the
they
best.
were Hoppe fans.
Oh, okay, Hoppe, okay.
Hoppe fans, not one of my least the people I like the least in the world out there.
You like them better than the communists, don't you?
Barely.
Oh, come on. Seriously?
Yes, because I think it leads to the same place. I really do. I think it leads to gulags.
Fine.
I think
But
anarchy
hold
leads to
on.
gulags. And I think Hoppe's view of anarchy definitely leads to gulags.
I'll grant you, just for the sake of argument,
Yeah.
that it leads to gulags.
Yeah.
However, surely you concede that they are against gulags, whereas the commies have no problem with it, and that's a big.
I think some do. I'm not
Okay.
sure.
Oh, that's
I'm
fair.
not sure people
That's
like Hoppe
fair
do,
then.
because if you read some of his stuff, one wonders, right? But wants monarchies and he wants
No, he said
and
monarchies
this-
are preferable to democracy,
Yeah,
which is
well,
true.
No, it's not. Oh God. I mean, one of the problems with anarchists is
One judge. That's the
is
monarch.
that one of the problems. Yeah, one judge, one authority. This
Yeah,
is why
the
I think,
monarch.
that's why I think
So you're happy.
anarchists are authoritarians.
So Yaron Brooks a Hoppian.
No, I'm
Get
not.
in the
I
chopper.
don't want one judge. I don't want an arbitrary judge. I want an objective judge.
There's an essay by John Hassness, I think his name, I'm going to bungle it. It's going to be in my upcoming book on anarchism. And he just discusses, and it's a very long, complicated technical issue, that the idea of objective law is incoherent.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's why we disagree so much.
Yeah.
Because I think objective law is the only coherent system.
Do you disagree that we, in effect, have competing systems of law under America? Meaning there's different ideologies. You have the Sotomayor ideology versus the Scalia ideology, and that effectively, and the point being, when you and I file a lawsuit, it completely depends on who the judge is.
Yes, and
Okay.
and in theory, I don't think the system works this way, but in theory, the way the system would work is that on new issues, there is some competition. Siri, I wasn't talking to you. Technology.
Capitalism.
So in theory, the system works, and this works, I think, with competing states, but also with competing legal views, particularly on a new issue. There's some. This is how common law worked, right? There's some evolution of it, and at some point, that gets codified into the law, and it gets objectified in that sense. That is, there's some conclusion that people come to. This is the role, in theory, of a legislature, and
Sure.
the legislature would be nice if it was composed of people who had some idea of legal philosophy.
Sure.
And it gets codified, and because these things are complex, and at some point it goes through all the arguments, and then a certain truth emerges, or certain truth is identified, and that's what gets encoded in law. That's what the purpose of a legislature is. Now, if you have competing mechanisms that don't converge on one authority, because there's no one authority, there are multiple authorities. That is, in a sense, there are multiple governments or multiple systems of enforcement,
Sure.
right? Then you get not just something emerging out of it. What you get is competing legal systems. Competing legal systems that now have competing mechanisms of enforcement, competing police forces, competing militaries, however we want to define it. And now there's no mechanism to resolve that. Now, yes, we could negotiate and there's goodwill and
Yeah.
so on, right?
Yeah,
No,
there you go.
no. But now we're talking
Yes.
about the law, what each position views as true and right, right? And it might
No, the guy with the legal authority is giving the gunda the authority to do things not legally.
involve, for example,
And when the guy who has the legal authority, his authority decreases, the gunda's authority also decreases. Gunda exists outside authority of Bihar government, that's anarchy or Matsya Nyaya. No, just stop calling it anarchy or Matsya Nyaya, because we don't agree with the definition here. But other than that, we can have a debate, of course. The Gunda exists outside authority of Bihar government. Outside authority of Bihar government, which is donated by the Bihar government. If that's not anarchy, according to people who are anarchists themselves, you are using it as a criticism. You are using it as a gali and calling a random thing anarchy, which we don't consider anarchy. So Gunda exists outside the authority of Bihar government because of the nature of the authority of the Bihar government.
it might involve the fact that the legal system has come to the conclusion that it's okay for children to have sex with adults, and this legal system thinks that is evil and wrong.
Sure.
Right. And this something has happened, right, between the two, right? How do you resolve that conflict? There is no resolution. If this adult wants to have sex with this child, this legal system thinks it's okay. That legal system thinks it. The only way to resolve that system is through one system imposed.
The parents of the child take him or her to that part of the land where that's not the law.
Imposing itself on the other. An example of countries.
And it's not like they come to know of the law one fine morning. They have known that law forever, so they don't raise their child in that area.
Is exactly that. When you had monarchies, when you had little states all over the place, the way any kind of dispute was resolved when there were issues of territorial disputes or issues of marriage or issues of legal.
No, Gunda is absolutely the prince under British Raj, but it's here the British Raj has told him, yes, you can break laws, no problem. Where is Bihar donating power? To the Gunda. And it's not just Bihar, it's absolutely West Bengal even today.
The different legal interpretations of how was war.
No, it
War-
wasn't.
Yes,
It was marriage. A lot of times people would marry a
Well, but
princess from another country. just to
Sure,
have peace.
forced marriages, which was not very pleasant.
I'd
and-
rather sacrifice one princess than a army.
No, I don't want to sacrifice anybody. And in addition, I don't want to sacrifice
I want to
anybody.
sacrifice the royals.
And in addition, well, I don't want royals.
well, that's
I
what
think
sacrificing
royals are
means.
pretty
Okay,
disgusting.
agreed.
And then
Let's
on
get the
top,
baskets.
and then on top of that, you look.
It does, yes. An unwritten treaty.
Those periods in history are filled with violence, much more violence than we have today, much more bloody than they are today, far less freedom than we have today in
After
terms of
you're
individual
comparing
freedom.
this to the 20th century.
Yes, I'm comparing a monarchy, right? You said that's preferable to democracy,
Yes,
right?
I do.
I'm comparing.
I'm saying Hoppe said that. I'm not saying I'm saying that.
Oh, I thought you.
To some
I thought
extent,
you agreed
to
with
some
it.
extent,
I
but
thought
I'm
you
not
agreed
going
with
to
it.
die in that
Hoppe
hill.
said that, and I think it's ridiculous. These kings and queens were fighting constantly. I mean, the wars back then were violent in a way that
Unlike now?
no, much more violent than now. If you look at the actual percentage of people killed in
the
war,
Stephen Pinker book.
yeah,
Yeah.
if you look at the
Veteran
percentage of
Angel.
people, and not just that, you can look at the other stats. The percentage of people killed in war back then were far greater than the
Sure.
percentage of people even during World War II and World War I. So anarchy, and David Friedman loves to quote the sagas of Iceland about how wonderful the anarchy, and I mean, it's funny because a lot of people who read David Friedman never read the sagas. It's worth reading. The sagas of the Iceland are filled with violence, constant violence, constantly people killing each other.
No, M. Shastri, West Bengal and Bihar are in different points in their journey. Leave West Bengal to its own shenanigans and it will get to Bihar. Bihar didn't start out this way. It got to here. Bihar started out as Chanakya, Vihara.
Over, I stole your chickens and you slept with my wife. And the only way to resolve disputes, was violence. There was no authority. There was no mechanism to resolve these disputes. There was a council, but the council couldn't enforce anything. So in the end of the day, we just resolved to violence. And this is legalized because there is no mechanism by which to make the violence illegal. So all anarchy is legalized violence, constrained up, for a while, and up until people stop that constraint by arrangements between the
Here we go.
security organizations. But the security organizations have us by the balls, to put it figuratively, right? They really do.
Sure. Unlike the state.
Oh, the state today has it, but I would much rather live in this state. Much rather live in this state. Much rather live in many more authoritarian states than this, than a place where there's constant violence.
I have a bunch of questions, but I'm enjoying
here's why
this.
everything he said is wrong.
Okay, yes.
First of all, the idea
Yeah, because he would not live in a Taliban state than USA.
of competing legal systems is inevitable. Because, first of all, the idea of competing legal systems is inevitable. Because what Rand talked about is what she wanted was, and this is really kind of out of character with her broader ideology, is I think this was her term, and I'm not saying this to make fun of you. When she has a judge and he's looking at the information, she wants him to be basically, I think she used the word robot, someone without any ideology, that they're just looking at the facts. They're not bringing their kind of worldview to it.
I take it as a compliment.
You are welcome. I think that given otherwise, her correct view that ideology, calling something ideology, is just a slur for someone's philosophy, that someone, especially someone as erudite, educated, and informed as a judge, has to, and in fact should, bring their ideology to their work, is in one sense a little contradiction in her view, number one. Number two is, we have right now the DA in San Francisco. I forget his name. He's the son of literal terrorists, communist terrorists. And he has made the decree unilaterally that if you shoplift for less than, I forget, $200, we're not prosecuting.
Yeah, I know that.
You know this game.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So now,
Good question, Gravity. Since the only difference between Bengal and Bihar is that they are in different points in their journey, therefore, there is still some semblance of an opposition in West Bengal. Therefore, he will have some minuscule amount of pressure that if I'm Trinamool's Gunda, I'll have to be kept in a little check because Shubhendu Adhikari is breathing down my party's neck. But in Bihar, it's sort of a unanimous consensus between all parties that, yeah, I come to power, that guy is on his own anyway. I'll just collaborate with him. They're little kings.
you and I, and Lex, I'm sure, probably agree that his ideology is abhorrent, that this doesn't help poor people, it doesn't help shop owners, it creates a culture, an area where it's just deleterious to human life.
Yeah.
However, he has, in one sense, given that he is a state operative, a legitimate worldview.
Can I ask you just a quick question?
Sure.
Why couldn't a security force in a particular context say, yeah, if you take stuff from that store, we're not gonna have any problem with that?
I agree with you. That's very fair. That's a very legitimate question. The point is, in the context that I'm talking about, that firm is like, wait a minute, I'm hiring you for security. You're saying we're not going to provide security. Why am I writing you a check? And we have examples of this in real life. If I get into a car accident with you, right? You have your car insurance. I have my car insurance. If your car insurance had their druthers, they wouldn't pay me 1 penny. If my car insurance didn't have their druthers, they wouldn't pay you 1 penny. We already have you were saying earlier that we need to have one kind of umbrella mechanism of use. There are already more cases than you can count where there's private arbitration. Now, the argument is the private arbitration only works because they have recourse to the government. But my point is, there's many examples where even though that recourse is theoretically possible, it's not a realistic concern, specifically because they know that if you have recourse to the state, you have no concept of what that outcome is going to look like, except knowing it's going to be exorbitant, it's going to be time consuming.
We can't choose.
And it's going to lead to discovery. A bunch of unnecessary secrets will have to come out. So it's better that you do out-of-court settlement.
The state, right? I mean, I'm as critical as the state as it is right now. Maybe not as critical as yours. Not as critical as yours. But I'm quite critical of the state as it is right now. But let's say we got into a traffic accident and you have a role.
No, Gravity. It's just a matter of time. There are dominant one-sided forces in Bengal as well, but it's just not happened for that long. And therefore, people are not 3-4 generations into a Gunda Raj. People are just waking up to this idea that, oh my God, we are about to become Bihar. Bihar is settled in their ways.
Voice. And I destroyed your Rolls Royce, and my insurance company now owes your insurance company a lot of money. And let's imagine it's a lot of money just for the sake.
And then you're clearly guilty.
Yeah, clearly guilty. And my insurance company looks at the books and it goes, I don't want to pay this.
Sure.
And you know what? I've got bigger guns than his insurance company.
Sure.
And I'm just gonna take over their insurance company. And hostile takeover takes on a whole new meaning when I can muster guns on my behalf than in a hostile takeover in a capitalist.
But the idea that you can muster people means that you'll have to pay them, pay for their injuries, pay for their deaths and stuff, and all that. So instead, why not just pay the insurance?
Context. That to me is what happens. That to me is inevitably what happens, and I think this is where the delusion comes in. The idea that everything that when big money is involved and big and power is involved. Remember, again, the same kind of politicians who today get into politics are likely to want to run some of these security agencies because they'll have a lot of power over people. So same kind of
I don't
maybe sociopaths would be.
I don't think it's the same skill set, but that's a separate issue.
I think it very much is. But
you think the people in Washington are the same as CEOs psychologically and skill set wise?
Well, today's CEOs, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
You might be right.
Because I think that's what's rewarded for CEO is somebody who could get along with government.
Okay.
And I think the kind of CEO who is going to run a security company, which is not just about business. It's about the use of force. It's about control. It's about negotiation with other entities that are using force, diplomacy. Then negate, and we should get back to objective law because I think it's essential to this whole argument. I think all you get into is security agencies fighting security agencies, and again, the biggest gun. And I don't mean here the guy who has the biggest literal gun, the rocket launcher versus the guns.
I got excited
by the biggest gun.
Yeah.
The party that has the more physical force, however that is mustered either by numbers or by weapons, is going to dominate.
Can I
and will take over everybody else. Now, one of the things that's common in a market is takeovers. It's consolidation. And here, the consolidation can happen through force, and you can roll other security companies, and that's exactly what will happen until you dominate the particular geographic area.
Okay, so let me explain why I disagree with that. You were just saying, and I agree correctly, I agree with you, that, listen, if I have access to the bigger gun, why am I paying you or whoever's paying whatever? I'm just going to use force and not pay them. We have that right now. It's called lobbying. Yeah. So instead of me, and I'm sure in your example you weren't being literal, instead of the insurance company literally having the army, they could be like, hey, let me call Corruptco, the mafia.
I agree.
Yeah, go out and take them out. Yeah. By having this federal government, as you know, and certainly I'm not a fan of, takes more through.
Yeah, Zamya, I was seeing the tweet by Matt Gaetz. He was pretty brutal on the Colombian president. He was saying that this is not a fight you want to pick with America, etc. Stay in your lane, like casual, colloquial, street bawal sort of language he was using. Nice.
Asset forfeiture, then burglaries combined. What asset forfeiture is, people don't even understand this. This is something crazy, which you're on, is as opposed to me, as opposed as I am, which is I'm a cop. I go to your house. I think you haven't been charged or convicted of anything. Or have evidence.
It's usually in a car.
Yeah. But no, it's like drug deals. Okay. I go to your house, you're a drug dealer. I say, and you can understand the reasoning, well, if someone is getting profit through illegal mechanisms, their profit isn't real, their property, and they shouldn't be rewarded that profit. So basically, I go to your house, you're a drug dealer, I seize all your property. Mm-hmm. You don't really have recourse, even though you haven't been through I'm just explaining to the audience, through due process and SOL. That combined, for people who don't know, is more than the total amount of burglaries in America. It's a huge and what happens is the police department, which seizes your car, auctions it, seizes your house, auctions it. It's a great way to line their pockets. This is a huge incentive. It's horrible. It's a huge incentive for police departments to do this because it's like, look, this guy's a crook. Maybe he's not a drug dealer, but he's clearly a pimp. Let me just take all his stuff and it's going to go to the community.
Well, and the rationale originally was, if I try him, in the meantime, he'll take that money and, funnel it somewhere else and hide it, and I'll never be able to get access to it. And it was passed in the 1970s under the original Caesar laws were kind of RICO acts,
Sure, yeah.
going after the mafia. And one of the reasons I despise Giuliani as much as I do, and there's very few politicians out there that I despise more, is because he was the first guy to use RICO on financiers.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't even a drug dealer. It was you were accused of a financial fraud. Not you weren't shown to be guilty.
Accused. Yeah.
All your
Innocent
assets
until
basically were forfeiture.
Innocent until proven guilty went out the window.
If you were managing money, you were done. You were finished.
So you're saying this kind of stuff naturally merges with the state.
Hold on. So my point is, what are presented as the strongest criticism of anarchism are inevitably descriptions of status quo. What you're describing is already the event. I am a big insurance company. I don't want to pay you. I call Washington. Either I pay you and Washington gives me a subsidy. So what you're describing is an inevitable aspect of having a government.
See, but
So what I'm
Or not even give a subsidy. He just there's going to be no quid pro quo. The politician is going to get donations from you, and when he comes to power, he's just going to fund a charity of his choice, and that charity is going to be mysteriously going to belong to you, the company.
Describing is the inevitable evolution of anarchy into a government. I just think that
Markets don't consolidate into monopoly. That's a leftist propaganda myth.
not markets where you have substitute products. But this is the problem. The problem is force has no substitute. That is, force is not a product you can have. So this is my fundamental issue about turning competing police forces. Force is not a product. Force
It's
is
a
not a
service.
service. It's not a service, and it's not a product.
Security is not a service?
No. Well, security in the context of a legal system is, but this is the point. The legal system, the laws, are not a service or a product. They are a different type of human institution. Science is not a product or service. It's a different type of human institution. There are different types of human institutions.
Sure.
Some are marketable. You can create markets in. Some you cannot. Law is not a marketable system.
Can I ask a question quickly? Is there any other field other than law that you think you can't create markets?
Well, science. Science is not marketable.
Okay.
The science itself is not marketable. What's
Sure.
true in science is true. And the same ethic is in law. Law is not marketable. Law is the system that allows markets to happen, right? You need a system of law, whether it's private law in a particular narrow context or whether it's broader law. Law is the context in which markets arise. So one of the reasons we transact is we know that there's a certain contract between us, explicit or implicit, that is protected by a certain law, whether it's protected by a private agency or the government, doesn't matter. But there's a certain contract that is protectable, right? By a system. Theoretically, yes.
Yes.
So law is the context in which markets arise. You don't create a market because there's nothing above it, in a sense. It is the context that allows markets to be created. Once you market it, markets fall apart.
So hold on a second. Yeah, hold on. So you think that law could be a market?
And it already is a market. And we see it, for example, eBay. If I am buying something from Yaron, I won't even know his name. I don't know. Maybe he's in another country. He screws me out of the money. I don't have access. I can't sue you. Or if I sue you in England, it's good luck with that. You're not going to argue that I'm going to sue you. What happens in this case, which has already been solved by the market, eBay and PayPal, which has access to your bank account, they act as the private arbiter. They're going to get it wrong a lot. Not even a question. Just like Yaron's not going to argue that the government right now gets it wrong a lot. That's not even a question. Mm-hmm. The point is, at the very least, I'm going to get my resolution faster, cheaper, and more effectively.
Yeah.
So the issue with having any kind of government, anything, and Yaron's not going to disagree with this, is at the very least, it's going to be expensive, inefficient, and cause conflict.
Yeah, but
Because it's an entire body who has monopoly on everything, and it's run by third-party non-stakeholders.
I think what it allows is
We don't even know what the Supreme Court's going to judge.
Again, you're moving us to today's environment, which I'm
moving
against,
us to
right?
reality.
No, but reality doesn't have to be what it is. I mean,
That's the most anti-Rand quote.
no,
ever.
in a sense,
Reality doesn't have to be what it is.
in a sense of the politics, the
Okay, sure.
political reality.
I know, but the quote by itself is great.
I know. You'd love to.
He agrees
you'd love
with Donald Hoffman as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, it turns out I agree with Hoffman.
He's an elf. That's what it is.
So it's where were we? So I believe that because we have a certain system of government, right, it allows for these private innovations to come about that facilitates certain issues in a much more efficient way than the government would deal with it. But it's only because we have a particular system that has defined property rights, that has a clear view of what property rights are. It has a clear view of what a transaction means, or what contract law is. And eBay has a bunch of stuff that you sign, whether you read it or not.
Of course.
All of that is defined first, and then there are massive innovations at the level of particular transactions, at the level of an eBay, that facilitate increased efficiency, and that's great. But the fact is, none of that gets developed. None of that gets created in a world in which I might be living under a different definition of property rights. eBay might be living under a separate definition of property rights. You might have a third definition of property rights. And there's no mechanism by which we can actually operationalize that, because we all have a different system.
There is a mechanism. We already have that. Let's change the example I just used. What happens if a Chinese person who has different definition of property rights kills an American in Brazil?
Again, in a smaller community, what happens is lots of violence.
No, but I'm talking about right now. If a Chinese person has...
Right now, the only reason that it doesn't lead to violence is because people are afraid of even more violence, and it affects many people, large numbers of people who don't want to go to war. But if you have small...
By the way, there are about 70 people watching combined from YouTube and Twitter. Why don't you guys ever comment? There are like 5 guys commenting. I'm curious, who are these people listening to it for so long? There's consistently 60 to 70 people listening. So comment a little, show yourselves, put up your hands, and at least give me some encouragement and let me know which side of the debate you are on.
In a state where the states were small, right? In those little states, there was war all the time. For
okay, Barbarika Smriti has is giving libertarian arguments now. Law isn't marketable. Then why do people emigrate to America and Afghanistan? Yes, law is marketable in that sense. People vote with their feet.
Exactly those reasons, because the cost was lower, because it was more personal, because I knew maybe the person who was killed over there, and I went to my king and encouraged him to go to war.
You know why there was war?
Violence is constant.
You know why there was war? Because there had been no Ayn Rand.
Yeah.
And good ideas lead to good societies, which leads to good people, which leads to good behavior, good interrelationships. So now that we have Ayn Rand,
yes,
all this stuff in the past is irrelevant, because if they studied her works, we would be... Rand was on Donahue again. You could watch the clip. And he asks her, he goes, you're saying that if we were more selfish and acted more self-interest, there'd be less war, less Hitler? And she said, there wouldn't be any. Right.
That's right. Well, if we were all selfish, there wouldn't be any Hitlers, right?
But who do you regard as the overweening authority?
The moment you try to become the Messiah and do something and basically create your entire persona pretending to be in the service of someone else, that's when distortions arise.
Buying a product from you as someone in England via eBay. Who's the governing authority?
The governing authority are the legal systems in England and the United States, which have to be synchronized pretty well.
Right, but what I'm saying is,
why
why
eBay doesn't function in certain countries, because there is no legal system.
I agree with you. My point is, why do those legal systems have to be a function specifically of geography, as opposed to why can't I, sitting here, I could sit here, let me finish my point. Yeah. I can sit here and be a British diplomat, right? And as a British diplomat, I'm going to be treated differently under American law than you are as an American citizen, as you are. Why can't you have that same process? Sure, we're geographically proximate, but I'm a citizen of this company and you're a citizen of that company.
Yeah.
Why would that be different in your opinion?
If it's England and the United States, it's probably not going to matter that much, right? But if it's Iran and the United States, then the fact that we're sitting next to each other makes a huge difference.
Oh,
massive difference. And the fact is that, and Ayn Rand, I think, would be the first to acknowledge this, and this is why she was so opposed to anarchy. It's not
why.
It is.
It's because of Rothbard.
No, it has nothing to do with
nothing.
It has nothing to do with
nothing.
Rothbard. Nothing.
How do you know?
Nothing.
How would you know?
Because argument against against anarchy as an intellectual one, not
Yeah.
a personality.
Can it be both?
Anyway, but
No,
back
it
to
has
it. Back
nothing
to
to
Iran. Back to Iran.
No,
Let's
it has
move-
nothing to do with Rothbard.
You don't
It's-
know that. You're not a psychic. You don't, or a necromancer.
The only
He's
way we're going to
second-
resolve this is arm wrestling, right? It's through violence.
Arm
But-
wrestling's not violence.
Words of violence.
Words.
No, it's a simulation of violence, which is why MMA, cricket, any sport, any competition, any inter-country competition is a simulation of violence.
Are violence, you're
Words
on.
of violence.
Which is why it pisses me off when people say cricket is not about countries. Cricket is about you watching a beautiful game. It's not about war between countries and stuff. Fucking idiot. Then why have countries in the first place? Then just watch IPL. If it's between India and Pakistan, yes, it's a toned down, simulated version of the potential violence that could have happened between these two countries. We just choose to settle it through cricket.
That's emotions of violence.
So wait, but
He throws me off with this stuff. That's the problem.
Even
right?
facts and
He's
truth?
very, very good. No, not facts and truth.
I mean, there's
Distortions and arbitrary statements. Because your statement about Rothbard is an arbitrary statement that has no cognitive standing.
Okay,
and
wait, hold on.
therefore I can dismiss it. So
Wait,
I'm
wait.
not doing like this because I want to
Wait, hold
dismiss
on.
it. It has no cognitive status.
that's
The fact that she disliked Rothbard doesn't mean that everything he said she was going to dismiss because she disliked him.
I agree with you. But what I'm saying is, it would not be impossible.
But there's
Yes, like the simulated violence between Mohun Bagan and East Bengal. It's a fight between good, tasty food and a bucket of sugar.
no evidence.
I'll give you some evidence. Human psychology. It is not impossible that if you hate some, what's his name? What's that guy's name?
Richard Wolff.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not impossible
Yes.
that if Richard Wolff said something that you would otherwise agree with, you hold on, let me finish. You'd
Right.
be dismissive or less likely to give him credit for it, being a
Exactly.
human being. That's all I'm saying.
It's as silly as to say Rothbard came up with this theory of anarchy because he was pissed off at Ayn Rand and wanted to write something.
I don't know.
Yeah,
Bring
that's my
it
point.
down because bring it down so that he can speak too, and let's keep it because
I don't think we're getting agitated.
no,
I didn't
you
take
guys
that way.
aren't. No.
Yeah.
No, bring it down, not in terms of give more pauses,
Okay.
so
Okay.
Michael can insert himself. That's what I mean.
See, private
What's
governance.
the point of that?
Private
No,
governance. Look, private. It's private
By the way, Narendra Modi's chief economic advisor is a Taekwondo black belt, and now he's going to be interviewed by a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt.
governance.
I'm all for private
I'm trying
governance. I
to
think private
establish
governance
the
is
geographic law of the land.
That's
I
not
don't know.
the point.
Kochu shag kola bhaja is still better than a bowl of sugar in everything. I had a ghoti a friend in office once. She offered me some egg curry. Oh my god, she was a ghoti from North Calcutta. Holy shit, that was dessert that you have after food. That was not egg curry.
I do think that Michael's. I mean, that's interesting that you disagree with this. I do believe that psychology has an impact on ideas. And Ayn Rand, you don't think Ayn Rand had grudges that impacted the way she saw the world?
Yeah.
We would like to think that.
I don't think any of her
If that wasn't the case, then we wouldn't have a problem that they were discussing a few minutes back, the ideologies of different judges.
grudges entered into philosophical statements, at least not that I can tell. And I don't see, and given the centrality
We'll never
Ayn
know.
Rand gave, and if you to the role of government, to the existence of government, to the need for government, to establish real freedom, and the way she defines freedom, which is very different than Rothbard, and the way she defines government, to say then that her opposition to anarchy is because of, I think is just an arbitrary
I didn't say
statement,
because
and
of.
not
I didn't
and
say
not
because. I
and
said
not
colored by.
and I don't see why psychology would enter it.
Yeah.
Now, maybe the tone in which you responded to an answer might have been motivated by that, something like. But given the amount of thought she gave to the role of government in human society and why government was needed, and why you needed laws in order to be free, that freedom didn't precede the right. You needed the right hierarchy. I think that we could say that give it at least the respect that this was.
No, the debate is not between this fish and that fish. The debate is between food versus a bucket of sugar. That's the entirety of ghoti food.
She might have been wrong, right? But she had a particular theory that rejected anarchy and that thought anarchy was wrong.
But hold on, I really resent, and I'm not saying you're doing this, the
Sure.
implication that if Rand was guided by her passions, that somehow is a criticism of her or lessens her. I think Rand was a very passionate person.
Absolutely.
I think she loved her husband enormously. She despised certain people enormously.
Sure.
And I don't think that there's
I
anything
don't
wrong
think
with
she
that.
would change her philosophical position about something because she disliked somebody.
I agree, but what I'm
Given
saying,
the amount of thought she gave to that
fair.
philosophical position.
All I'm saying is, it is possible that if someone comes across ideas that she had not considered before, if she regarded this person as a bad actor, like all of us, she would be less likely to take them under consideration.
Sure.
That's all I'm saying.
Sure.
Right.
And I think other people confronted her with the ideas of anarchy. I don't think Rothbard was the only one.
Correct. Roy Charles as well. Yeah.
Roy Charles certainly did. And she rejected them. And she rejected them because she had, and whether you agree with her or not, she had a thought out position about why you needed to have this particular structure in place so that markets and human freedom could exist.
It's just really interesting because this is the one time, in my view, and please correct me if I'm wrong, where she invokes need as kind of a basis for political activity. So if, let's suppose you want this federal government, whatever you want, you don't want it like it is now, but like your version of the government. I don't see why it's an issue for you, for me and Lex, to say we're not privy to Washington, we're going to do our own thing. And given if we go about our lives not initiating force and being productive actors, why she would have an issue with this?
Why would I care?
Well, you would care because if you're saying the government has a monopoly on force between these two oceans,
So you can do
Hold on,
that
let me
as long
finish.
as you
Can I
don't
finish?
violate somebody else's rights.
sure. But what I'm saying is we just declare ourselves sovereign. We're not going to pay any income taxes. We're going to be peaceful people. We're going to contribute. And when Lex and I have disputes, we're going to call Joe. That's Joe Rogan. You're never going to get to meet him, but he's a good guy.
I know.
We're going to call Joe, and Joe's going to resolve it. between
He's so
us.
good at like, needling and
That's
getting you
fun.
off topic
It's-
that
it's
way. It's
beautiful.
he's really effective at it.
He's
Look,
Muhammad Ali, and you're Joe
I
Frazier.
always say when I debate communists, I always say to them,
You mean Lex?
yeah, maybe Lex, maybe I should view this as
Comrade, I love you.
that if they really believe
Burgundy, not red.
if they really believe in what they think, then they should be advocates for capitalism. Because under capitalism, under my system of government, capitalist government, right, they could go and start a commune. They can live in communists. They can live to each according to each according to his needs, from each according to his ability.
Yeah, Autovlogs already exists. And Shoman Balti, yes, it is about chili. There can be no food without chili, and our livers and kidneys are not so weak that it affects us in the morning.
All they want and live their pathetic, miserable lives that way. And the government would never intervene because the whole view of capitalism is freedom, is we leave them alone, right? As long as you're not violating my rights, as long as you're not taking my property, as long as you're not engaging with. So in that sense, yeah, you and Lex can form your own thing. I don't believe in compulsory taxes anyway. So you and Lex can do your own thing, never pay taxes. Do your thing as long as you're not violating the laws, and the laws are very limited, right? Because they're only there to protect individual rights. So as long as you're not violating somebody else's property rights or inflicting force on anybody else, you're peaceful. You can do what you want. Don't
Great.
have
Great. Case
Don't-
closed.
don't have sex with kids. Right?
I will stop immediately.
Good.
The rest of us are just
so
playing
it's-
checkers, and he's playing chess.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm like,
a government that
I will
protects
stop
individual rights
immediately.
properly is a government that leaves you alone to live your life as you see fit, even if you live your life in a way that I don't approve of, that I don't think is right. I mean, that's the whole point, right?
okay, then we're in complete agreement.
The only thing you can do is, try to enforce arbitrary laws that you come up with
Sure.
on me.
Of course.
Of course.
Absolutely. Okay, great.
Wouldn't
I
it be
will stop
wonderful if we
immediately.
lived in a world where the rights protecting laws are superfluous, but the reality is usually that somebody violates them, whether by accident or
Sure.
intentionally, and that you need some mechanism. Now, if you guys can resolve that dispute without getting involved, fine. But if
Right.
you guys land up not resolving, there is another authority that will help you resolve it.
Yeah.
So
I'm
can I ask you a question? Under anarchism,
I always do.
what kind of systems of laws do you think will emerge? Do you think we'll have basically a similar kind of layer of
Yeah,
universal law
let me-
to where, like,
Let me
you-
answer this. This is a great question. I know where you're going with this. This is often presented as a criticism of anarchism. And this is actually something I think Yaron would agree with as well in other contexts, which is this. One of the reasons communism can't work, central planning can't work, and this was one of Mises's great innovations, is if I could sit down, it's like asking, what would the fashion industry look like if the government didn't run it? There's no way for me to know. What the fashion industry is, which all of us are in favor of it being free, is literally millions of designers, of seamstresses, of people who make the fabric. Also references throughout history and these creative artistic minds.
Yeah, like the music industry to a large extent, film industry to a large extent, because there is corruption and stuff. People want to fund stuff, people want to push certain narratives and stuff, but there's not actual government intervention. There's not state intervention in those industries. There has never really been, unless there's that one political party saying that you have to do this and that, but that's not exactly government intervention. That's just one politician doing some corruption. There's no legal government intervention in the entertainment industry, which is why in India, that's the one thing that has always functioned pretty well forever, more or less.
Putting things together in every year. And
even today in West Bengal, the movies might not be good because of overall commerce and bad education system, idea wale people, sab chale gaye hai bahar, etc. Even now, we keep on churning pretty much good songs every now and then in Bengal's Tollywood.
And there's no shortage of clothes. In fact, we make so many clothes that we send them in landfill sizes to overseas.
Yeah, the example of fashion industry not having any government intervention.
For countries, and you have people in these destitute countries wearing like Adidas shirts. They can't even read English, but because we don't know what to do with all these clothes. That's how the glory of free enterprise is. The problem is
if you keep a babu or a government in charge of sand in a desert, deserts would face shortage of sand in 6 months.
Problem used this loosely. Everything comes cheap and overabundant. It's food, you know.
Well, it doesn't actually come overabundant. But it's done properly.
Sure,
it's the
that's fair.
Supply meets demand.
Sure, that's fair. But I'm saying is like if 150 years ago you said, you know, one day we're gonna have an issue where there's gonna be so much food and
obesity,
that the kids are too fat. It's just gonna be like I too fat. Like I have 4 who are dead in the crib. I wish. I mean, what kind of paradise is this? So right. What you would have.
Yeah, that's what I was saying, that people who say that Western style capitalism is as bad as socialism. No, it's not. Would you rather starve to death or become an obese person who eats depression medication?
We have this right now in certain senses. You have the Hasidim, you have Sharia, you have I'm sure in the medical system, they have their own kind of private courts, and court martials is another example of this, although obviously that's through the state. So you would have innovation in law under markets just the same ways you'd have it and we have this already. Maybe it's not, Yaron doesn't like in terms of like murder and rape, and I can understand why, but in terms of like business and interactions, he would have no problem with different arbitration firms having different rules for like what kind of evidence is allowed. Maybe you only have 60 days to make your case, and so on and so forth. And the market is a process of creative innovation, and it would be dynamic. It would be changing.
So what's interesting relating to this is that
and listening to feedbacks.
One of the ways Ayn Rand proposed raising revenue for the government, because she was against, was, let's say we have a contract. We could just have it arbitrated without government interfering.
Yeah.
But if we wanted to access the courts of the government as a final authority, we would pay. And that's how governments would raise some of the funds, would be raised that way. So there's definitely a value to having this innovation in the public space. But I don't believe that is the case with murder. I don't believe that is the case with violent crime. And it's funny you bring up Sharia, because David Friedman, when he gives
wait, I got to ask you to clarify. I'm not trying to interrupt you. You were talking about with murder. I mean, you would agree, I think, just to clarify for the audience, that there is room for innovation in murder, because there's things like manslaughter, there's murder 1, murder 2.
Oh, yeah. I don't think it happens at a market level. I don't think there's a market innovation for murder. Somebody has to figure out what those standards are. But they will evolve as we gain more knowledge.
But we're all in agreement that the word murder means very different things.
Oh, absolutely. And if circumstances matter, and standards of proof, and standards of evidence, all of that there has to be
and consequences too. Yes,
all of that there has to be a standard, and that's what I think a proper government provides. So David Friedman uses in some of his talks about private law, he uses Sharia law in Somalia as an example. Look, legal systems evolve privately, independent. Yeah, authoritarian ones that don't respect the rights of women at all. Are you married?
No, but we all want to have sex with our mother, as Freud would say.
Oh my God, can we make that a clip?
Yep.
Where the hell did that come from?
That's much better than what I was just saying about the kids.
I appreciate that. Okay, so we went in a voluntary way, although sometimes for Yaron and sometimes for Michael it felt involuntary. But we all got the big guns. So how do we land this? Clearly, there's a disagreement about anarchism here.
I think we're in agree. I think there's a big agreement, because if Yaron was saying that if I want to have my voluntary stupid thing with you, and his government is not going to tax me and is not going to insinuate itself unless we're murdering each other, something like that, I'm okay with that.
So if you take the example of Sharia law, which was mentioned earlier, so if you have a little community within my world, right, that imposes Sharia law, if it starts mutilating little girls,
sure,
then you impose your law on it, right? You impose the law on it because it's an issue protecting individual rights. If they want to treat women, if women have to cover up and the women are okay with that, that's fine. If the woman wants to leave but is not allowed to leave, that's where my government would step in and allow her, prevent them from using force against her. And that's it, right?
And hence the battles they lost in Iraq and Vietnam.
Okay.
Now, I think it's more complicated than that, right? Because I think there are complex issue property rights often where it's not going to be easy for you guys to resolve, and particularly if you interact with people outside of your community.
Sure.
But yeah, that's my view is government is there to protect individual rights. That's it. Otherwise, leave you alone.
This was a nice, fun debate, and this will be the last point of discussion. 10 বছর carefree থাকবে. Yes, I think Mamta is collaborating with the center on in the parliament. I think Waqf bill will be passed with their collaboration, and therefore she will be allowed to stay on in power, I think. Why only women today? Even Niranjan, yeah. Okay, then thank you for joining the live stream, guys. And we realized today that M. Shastri is actually a socialist. We will deal with him later. We will send him to a libertarian gulag where he will be forced to be free and his individual rights will be enforced, whether he likes it or not. Thank you for joining, guys. Good night. Bye-bye. Oh, I can't put up music because I'll get a copyright strike. Oh, so this is the end of the stream. Bye-bye, guys. Good night.